it's actually recording. So that's what he's saying, that it takes that long for it to record. Yeah, and now the meter is running.
And valid URL, that means it's finite speed.
Correct. So no point in even starting that. Do you have more batteries for number two?
I got 2 bars.
Oh, that should last.
Yeah, that's
Well,
right.
Put 3 on the podium with him.
Yeah.
Hello. This is a test.
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll ask you for the reasons.
Oh, these are not, oh, for items not on the agenda. Well, if it's non-agenda, which I'm hope to do, because at the beginning, but this is the agenda. If you're talking about something like parking or
Before we start officially, I just want to welcome everybody. And if you plan to speak tonight, if you can please come up and sign one of the speaker sheets, it just helps us make sure we have everybody's name spelled correctly in minutes.
tell people if you're running the left.
Yeah, this is on the agenda, and this is not on the agenda.
Just give me 1 second here.
It's just me.
Oh.
I want to make sure that I sign immediately after you, so I speak to you.
And you should say opposed to the parking specifically so they know. Oh, wait, never mind.
Oh, is it for items? This is on the agenda, although
You're right, you're right, you're right, you're right.
I was seeing an agenda.
Oh, I just think all of us should sign in even if we don't speak, so
Right.
say opposed.
No, yeah.
Oh, the guy in front of me, I should tell him to write, he's opposed.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. You too. Yeah, she'll do like that.
Good evening. I am calling this meeting back to order. This is the April 24th, 2017 meeting of the Princeton Council. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay. Well, it's great to see so many people here at the meeting tonight. We do have a very full schedule, and I know there's a lot of you who would like to speak. So I'm going to do my best to keep us on track. And to start things off tonight, we have a bit of ceremony that is always important. We like to recognize individuals and businesses and nonprofits in the community who go above and beyond to make Princeton the special place that it is. And every month, a different member of council has the opportunity to recognize someone. And this month, I'd like to turn it over to Councilman Miller.
Thank you, Mayor Lempert. Tonight, the mayor and council honor Claire Jacobus, who has been a resident of Princeton for 47 years. During that time, Claire has served in a volunteer capacity in many Princeton organizations that have played a key role in knitting together the fabric of our community. She has served as a volunteer for the Bryn Mawr Book Sale, for Women's Space, and Planned Parenthood of Mercer County, as a board member of Compassionate Choices, Friends of the Princeton University Library, the Paul Robeson House, People and Stories, and as chair of the 50th and then the 75th anniversary of the Princeton Adult School, as president of the board of High Tops, president of the board of the Adult School, and president of the Friends of the Princeton Public Library, where I had the pleasure of serving with her as treasurer when she was the president of the Friends, and my colleague Joe Butler also served on the executive council of the Friends at the same time. Her volunteer interests range from organizations that provide assistance to the most vulnerable and needy of our residents, to fostering the development of one of the best community-based adult continuing education systems in the state, to the rehabilitation of the Paul Robeson House, an institution that will honor a part of the history of Princeton that is really not well understood. It's with great pleasure that I award the Certificate of Appreciation to Claire Jacobus, who exemplifies the spirit of volunteer that makes Princeton a very special community.
My name is, and I live at. I accept this in the name of many people here and many people there who exhibit every single day what William James called civic courage, the ability to get up and do it, whatever it is, schlepping 3,000 invitations to the post office for a benefit, or figuring out how to get 200 people in and out of the Senior Resource Center after they've had their flu shots. It's deeply, deeply important work. And I urge all of you, if you haven't already, to give it a try. I have a shout out for my husband David, without whom nothing would have been possible, and my daughter Laura, who's carrying on the tradition, and all of you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Congratulations, Claire, and thank you. We have a proclamation this evening, which I'm not going to read, but I encourage you to look. It's on the website as part of our agenda packet tonight, and it's proclaiming May as National Bike Month, May 10th as Bike to School Day, and May 19th as Bike to Work Day in Princeton, New Jersey. And we can hope for a sunny May to make biking all the more enjoyable. And now we'll move on to announcements and start on my right with Ms. Howard. Mr. Liverman?
Yeah, I just wanted, maybe just one or two items I just wanted to bring up. One is that I want to thank everybody for participating on Friday night for the Corner House Foundation, I should say Foundation banquet. It was a great time, a great turnout. It was like 180 some odd tickets that were sold. I was at Mercer County Boathouse, and I want to thank everybody on behalf of Corner House for showing up. And the other is on May 24th, and I'll announce it again, we're having a marijuana forum at John Witherspoon School, and it's in conjunction with the police department, the prosecutor's office, the school. It's going to be a magnificent program between 7 and 9 p.m. For parents and anyone interested in regard to marijuana and where we are today with marijuana and what can happen when you're pulled over or arrested with marijuana. So this is the beginning of probably another 2 times I'll announce this, but on May 24th between 7 and 9 p.m. at John Witherspoon School. It's going to be a terrific forum. Thank you.
Ms. Carmiller? Ms. Butler?
Yes, thank you. I want to just offer my congratulations to Lance as our liaison to Corner House. It really was a wonderful event, and it was just thrilling for me. I think, for some reason, I think I maybe have skipped a year or two in here at the benefit, but it was really terrific to see how many new faces. The old stalwarts are still supporting it, and there was really a group of new, young, generous people who have taken the reins. It's really terrific to see. So thank you. I want to announce some good news. The pool will open on Saturday, May 27th, and will be open all 3 days of Memorial Day weekend from 11 to 8 p.m., 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. We will also be open on the weekends of June 3 and 4 and June 10 and 11 before opening full-time on Wednesday, June 14th. The recreation office will also be open from 10:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. on all weekend dates listed above, so people can come in and get their seasonal passes. We're also looking to hire additional lifeguards. Applications are available at princetonrecreation.com under the seasonal employment tab. We're offering a lifeguard recertification course on June 6th and 8th from 5 to 9 each night. For anyone that's previously held a lifeguard certification but has let it expire or will have it expire mid-season, this is your chance to renew. And the last special needs prom will be held on Friday, May 5th at the Suzanne Patterson Center from 7 to 9:30. And we've received about 50 financial aid applications to date, and we're looking for the pool memberships, and we think we'll get between 100 and 120 total. So,
Thank you, Mr. Quinn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to call attention to my colleagues and to the community that tomorrow night the Civil Rights Commission will be meeting in this room. We'll be hearing from a group of young people in the community who were very affected by the recent racial slurs incidents at Princeton High School, and with committed and faithful Princetonians and Corner House, this group of kids took the initiative to meet, and they want to share their feelings and their findings with the Civil Rights Commission. So that's tomorrow at 6:30, and we're expecting a larger than usual audience, so we've moved it to this room. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I have a few announcements as well. The first is that Princeton's Youth Advisory Committee is now open. The application is open for next school year, and there's openings for current freshmen who are rising sophomores. So if you know any high school students who would be interested in getting involved civically, I highly encourage you to encourage them to apply, and they can find the application on the municipal website at princetonnja.gov. And for adults, we have a couple openings on our Complete Streets Committee. So if you're interested, this is the committee that works on transit, bike committee issues, and other transportation issues. So if that's something that's of interest to you, I also encourage you to apply, and you can find the application under volunteer opportunities on the princetonnj.gov website. This weekend, on Saturday, Princeton will be hosting a climate march starting at 9:30 a.m. at the DNR Greenway. The march will go to Heinz Plaza, and there'll be a rally there starting at 11. And if you want more information, you can go to the Sustainable Princeton website. Also on April 29th, the Minority Student Achievement Network and Pulse Youth Organizations at Princeton High School are bringing together students, parents, teachers, school staff, community partners, and organizations for a day of discussions on current topics impacting our schools and community. And that event will take place from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at Princeton High School. And they're asking if you're interested to RSVP, and I did see an RSVP form on the Not in Our Town website. And finally, actually I had two more announcements. This Sunday is Communiversity, so please plan accordingly. And on May 15th, there will be a special meeting of the Master Plan Committee of the Planning Board. They'll be meeting here in this room at 7 p.m. And Princeton University will be presenting an update on their campus plan, and the consultants will be here. So I encourage everybody to come back for that meeting. Again, that's May 15th at 7. Are there any staff announcements? No? Nope. Okay. Then we will move on to approval of the minutes. We have two sets of minutes from February 13th, the closed session minutes and the regular minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Liverman, seconded by Mr. Miller. Are there any corrections or comments on the minute?
Lance, were you absent? I don't know. I have a feeling.
Okay, well, just in case.
Yes, you were absent, so let me move it and somebody else
Okay,
can
so moved by Ms. Butler, seconded by Mr. Miller. Any comments or corrections? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes passed unanimously. And next we come to comments from the public for items that are not already on the agenda. I know there's a lot of you who want to speak for items that are on the agenda, and I would just ask that you wait till we come to that section of the agenda. And once we get a little further on in the meeting, I'd like to just take a show of hands of what people are here for, and we can move around the agenda a bit so you don't have to be here with us till midnight, although you're welcome to stay if you want. So we'll start with the sign-up sheet, and I'd like to call up Peter Madison.
Thank you. Peter Madison. I live on Snowden Lane for the past 37 years. Spring is here, and the landscaping crews of 4 and 5 employees are descending on our neighbors' homes and your neighbors' homes with multiple lawn mowers and leaf blowers, 7 days a week. Now, Council previously discussed a leaf ban, or a ban on leaf blowers, which ended in controversy, like many things do in Princeton. So I would like to suggest a compromise. You already have an Ordinance 10A that limits construction contractors to working on Monday through Friday from 7 to 6 and Saturday 8 to 6. And I think that landscape contractors should be held to the same schedule. At least we would get a nice quiet Sunday. I don't want to impose this, however, on individual homeowners, because weekends are often the only time they can do yard work, and they do not use multiple pieces of power equipment simultaneously, which creates a lot of noise. And generally their equipment is muffled and not as loud. So this should be, in my opinion, a minimum standard, since they are, in fact, contractors. In an ideal world, I would love to see both Saturday and Sunday restricted. What would that accomplish? Well, a lot of the employees who work for these landscape contractors are working 6-7 days a week, sometimes without overtime. But I'll play devil's advocate, and conversely, many of these employees want to work as often as they can or as much as they can, even if they don't get overtime. So I don't want to necessarily impose a restriction on them from working Saturday. But I do think we definitely should have a restriction on working on Sunday. Now, I know there's a noise ordinance, or at least I believe there is one. I don't think that we should use that as a substitute because it would require, one, that we individually as neighbors, or should as neighbors, have noise meters, which none of us have, and I certainly don't want to spend the money to buy. So what do we have to do? Call the police, and the police have to come out and make an unnecessary trip to find out that there's a noise, they've exceeded the noise limit, and maybe or maybe not the contractor gets a fine. So in summary, please consider an ordinance making landscape contractors subject to the same construction contractor requirement that they cannot work on Sunday, and make sure that the fine is significant enough, perhaps $500, that any landscape contractor that violates it will think twice about working on Sunday. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that suggestion. I think it's an interesting one, and I think we can think about, what committee might make sense to have them do some research and do some vetting on it.
Would it be public safety or would it be public works?
No, I think Public Works, or I think Environmental Commission has
Okay.
looked at it in the
Okay.
past too, and I think Public Works maintains the landscaping list.
Right, but Mayor, we discussed this at length when we did the noise ordinance. It is part of that, and actually Jeff Grosser, our health officer, is well versed on the details of this. So we can discuss it in some committee again if you want, but we've been over this pretty carefully, so let's not reinvent the wheel. We can.
Yeah,
Well,
just, I don't know, Jeff, wants to speak up.
Yeah, the noise code that we're talking about is the noise ordinance for Princeton. There's a model noise code which requires decibel readings. Our code does not require decibel readings. It has to do with plainly audible sound. So if in fact it was causing, disturbance inside of your home, disturbing you on a Sunday, it's something that could be enforced. I know from the noise code and also from the landscaping code that they overlap. So for instance, if that started up prior to 10 a.m. on Sunday, they would be in violation of the landscaper ordinance and the model noise code. So in that case, a simple call to the non-emergency police line, either the health department or the police department will respond. And I can speak to the commercial blowers. They can be louder than a homeowner's blower. And if there are multiple being used at the same time, the health department's happy to take that phone call because we're happy to come out and inspect the mufflers to make sure they're adequately muffled.
Okay.
Well, you just indicated that there's no specific noise decibel level, so how do the
It's
police
correct.
administer
It's
something
called
like that?
It's called plainly audible, which means it's plainly audible to the person coming out to respond. So if I was on your property line and the noise was disturbing, your peace and property, it's something that could be a violation.
And if they're not specifically on my property line, oh, you mean that's where the noise
Exactly.
would be?
Yes.
Well,
That's correct.
I appreciate that, but I think then we're wasting a lot of the police department's time.
It's
to
not
come
only
out
the
and
police
do that.
department, it's also the health department. The health department's actually one of the other enforcing agents.
And the health department's available on Sunday if I call them?
In certain cases, especially if the noise is disturbing an entire neighborhood, yes.
Well, I still think it's much simpler to apply the building contractor standard to a landscape contractor and at least have one day without me having to call the health department or the police department to bother them on something that's not really an important issue for the police. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on an item that's not already on the agenda?
Hi, this is somewhat related to something else, but not really. It involves the Veblen House and Cottage, and we just received, I'm with the Steve Heltner, 139 North Harrison Street, president of the Friends of Herrington Woods. And thank you for this opportunity. I do want to say we have been, we submitted a proposal to acquire and repair the Veblen House and cottage out in Herrington Woods in February to the county and received no response until today when they said that they were going to tear down four of the buildings and then leave the garage, which is kind of a token thing, but anyway, we are somewhat outraged, and we question whether the county even has legal right to do this. They have not been able to find the deed for the Veblen House property. The deed is missing, and they have not lived up to the desires of the Veblens stated in the will when the Veblens donated 82 acres plus their house and cottage to 96 acres to create Princeton's first nature preserve, Herrington Woods. So we believe we can fix it up, and we actually just had a wonderful nature walk out in Herrington Woods yesterday, and we ended with some refreshments next to the house, and I think I've distributed a letter to you with 80 signatures of people who care a lot about Princeton and want to see these houses preserved and believe they are a very important part of the landscape out there. And I cannot imagine why the county does not want to speak with us. In their letter today, they cited a 2011 architectural study which had grossly inflated the cost of repair. And there's many levels of repair which can still maintain the building as a wonderful part of the landscape. It's the cultural soul of Herrington Woods, and the county wants to rip it out, and they may not even have a legal right to do so. And I encourage you to tell them to hold off and rethink this whole thing, because this is a travesty. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, Mr. Mill?
Like a couple of my colleagues up here, a few years ago, at Steve's invitation, we visited the Veblen House, the property. We're inside and around the outbuildings, and I think that there is an opportunity here for the Friends of the Herrington Woods to take on the responsibility for preserving an important part of Princeton's history, the Veblen House. And I think that rather than have the county bulldoze the property or have the property continue to deteriorate by neglect, the volunteer group ought to be given an opportunity to see what they can do with the property. I'm sure that many of the people here tonight are part of the group that would be willing to work on the property. And I think rather than destroy it, the volunteer group ought to be given an opportunity to begin to preserve it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. I'd just like to piggyback on what Bernie has said. I understand that the county has a lot of properties in which they have, buildings that just exist on these properties, and no one takes care of them, and they don't know really, certainly don't have the storied history. But I think as long as we have a volunteer group and they've organized and become a Friends, a 501c3, and they're willing to chip away at it, I would agree with Bernie that I'd like to be supportive. I mean, if that group didn't exist, we wouldn't have a leg to stand on in terms of trying to save those, but they're chipping away and working on it, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask for clarification about what a next step might be if we did want to support them? If we wanted to put in...
We can put together a resolution if you want to send to the county. I mean, it's the county's decision, so
I think that might be a good way to structure a conversation about it.
Okay, so if Joe and Bernie, you want to work on something together? Okay.
And what's the timeline, Steve?
We don't, I mean, a lot of these buildings kind of disappear in the middle of the night. There was something in the newspaper about the DOT tearing down a building that dated back to the Revolutionary War. Everybody had agreed to save it, and then the DOT decided, it was in the right-of-way that they wanted to expand their road, I think, and it just was down one day. So we're living day to day here.
Okay.
We go out and visit the house every day, and it was there this afternoon, that's all I can say. So if we could possibly, tell the county tomorrow, if possible, just hold off and let us work this out, that would really be very helpful.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on an item that's not already on the agenda? Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to close public comment, and we'll move on to the first public hearing for this evening, which is 17-127, resolution confirming Edge Hill Road sidewalk assessment. Is there anybody presenting on this, or Ms. Stockton?
Well,
Sure.
she thinks you're in.
I'm Laura Jacobus. I live.
Sorry. I was gonna have just a professional, and then I'll call up with the sign-up sheet.
Thank you. Okay. The Edge Hill Street sidewalk ordinance was adopted in July of 2014, which was prior to council's decision to change how sidewalk assessments were handled. In spring of 2015, council made a policy shift for new sidewalks and repairing sidewalks that, rather than following the former procedure of assessing 50% of the cost to the residents and assuming 50% of the cost, the change was made to assume the entire cost of a sidewalk repair or replacement project if it was part of a capital project. So the Edge Hill Street ordinance came before that point, but we did start construction in July of 2015, and work was completed in the fall. We've provided you with both the preliminary assessment as well as the final assessment. All of the final assessments have gone down except for the case where one of the residents asked for some additional work to be included in the assessments. The original assessment was for approximately $31,000 to be shared by the property owners. The current assessment, the final assessment's $23,000 to be shared by the residents. We have received requests from 5 of the property owners requesting that council reconsider the assessment in light of the new policy.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to open up the public
Before we
hearing.
do, I mean, just because I think it might help the public discussion, I just wanted to see if because I would like to move that we assume the cost given our new policy, in part because we did this for Poe Road. So, and I thought if we can get agreement, it will make the public discussion shorter. So I thought, why don't we do a straw poll up here first to see if there's agreement on that. The ordinance is to assess the properties, and I'm saying I would like to take the necessary steps to, for the municipality to take on the cost.
It sounds
If we
like
need to have a discussion.
divided opinion up here. Is there anybody who?
Question,
Okay.
are there any other similar projects hanging out that
There is one.
One.
Which is what?
Parkmore, Van Dievender.
And it's about the same cost as I understand.
Right.
So we would, I mean, if we're doing this, we should do that as well.
Yes.
In the interest
Yes.
of fairness, yes.
Yes.
But somebody has to be last. I mean,
Agreed. Agreed. I just thought we'd have the discussion. We might be able to have the discussion first and not have a really long if people, if everybody agreed with me.
I don't know if there's strong feelings, or I think it sounds like everybody wants to hear the public hearing. So we'll call up Laura again. Thank you. And then Betsy, you're next.
So I'm Laura Jacobus. I live on Edge Hill Street. And since the work started after the waiver was made for the town to pick it up, it seems reasonable that we could be swept into the town picking up the fee. I think everybody, when we went around and we sort of polled the neighborhood, people took a more conservative approach. I had concrete, which was less expensive than the bluestone, with the idea that because this issue came up during the original discussion of the sidewalks. They look great. The neighborhood is used extensively by tourists, and so it's important to have it safe, and I think we're all in agreement of that. I think that we just felt that since the work began, after the other folks in the town had the waiver, we wanted to be considered for that as well. We all pay huge taxes, and it would just be nice to eliminate that one extra fee. So, thank you.
Thank you. Betsy?
Hi, just to sort of... What I do? Like this? Okay. Just to speak in support of Laura, my neighbor, I'd like to make a couple points. First, 5 letters doesn't sound like a lot, but as Deanna can tell you, this is half of a fairly short block. So 5 represents a substantial proportion. And of course you understand just our concern that construction started after the decision to cease charging homeowners for sidewalks had been made. Just a little bit about the demography. In the past 5 years, 2 of my neighbors have moved out because of taxes, and I'm not blaming you guys for the taxes. I know most of it's out of your control, but it's a problem generally in Princeton. I know 2 other households who are considering moving because of taxes. So when I was young, Edge Hill Street was described to me as the Gold Coast, and unfortunately, the current inhabitants are on the whole rather elderly and do not have as much money as the people who lived there 30, 40 years ago. So any help would be much appreciated. And finally, I would like to say something positive, which is we're very grateful to Deanna. The money that we're complaining about would be significantly higher if she hadn't gone well under budget for what I can assure you was a very fine job with the sidewalks. If I were going to be really contestational, I would say some of the neighbors are concerned, since our communications with the seminary aren't very direct, that the seminary's cut a special deal that we don't know about. So that's not true. Okay, great. Well, that would be a relief to my indignant neighbors. But I'll just say these are good people, elderly people mainly, who, because these are old and frail houses, have put a lot of their own money to keeping them going. And I can agree with Laura that you do see tourists and groups going up Edge Hill Street quite often. So we feel we are adding to the value of the town. Thank you very much.
Thank
and
you.
Again, I'd like to thank the engineers.
Thank
They
you.
did a great job.
Thank you for that. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of this public hearing on Edge Hill? Okay, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Is there, I think before we start discussing it, somebody should move the resolution, and then we can vote it down if that's the decision. So is there a motion to approve the resolution?
So moved.
It's moved by Ms. Butler. Is there a second? And seconded by Mr. Miller. And then I'd like to open it up for council discussion. I think we've heard from Ms. Butler and Ms. Crummeller, but I don't know if anybody else is...
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think it's fine. I think it's fair to assume the cost with this project. And I'm looking at the, at all the owners, and it seems like the seminary is the largest person on the block. Or,
That was actually the one reason I was a little bit hesitant about it, because it would actually be good, in my view, to have the seminary pay. So, in fact, if we do decide to repeal, or whatever you call it, the assessments, maybe we can ask the seminary to voluntarily pay for their sidewalk.
Yeah. What is
Just
our
because it's an
Good luck.
institution.
Good luck.
Yeah, is our policy
Lance,
apply
just-
to all landowners or just to homeowners?
Right. It applies to all,
I think
everyone now.
legally, we would have to do the whole thing. I
Lance,
think
just
we
to be
talked
clear-
about that already too, Heather.
Just to be clear, the resolution that we just put on the floor is for charging the residents. So,
and I'm saying not, I'm saying that we pay.
right, so just make
Yes.
sure you
Yes, yep.
reverse your vote.
Okay, are we ready to vote, or is there anybody else?
can
who
I
has
just-
a comment? Oh, Mr. Quinn?
Just who would be last then? I mean, what would be the new cutoff based on, so are people from, say, 2012 or 2013 going to come up and say,
No, there are only two pending assessments that we haven't already, done. And that's this one and the Park Place one. And, I feel like it's a pro-walking and biking and walkability issue.
Can I just say quickly, when this project was undertaken, there was the expectation that the residents were going to pay. I paid for my new sidewalk, they were going to pay for their new sidewalk. We did have a change, but when this project was approved, it was approved with the idea that the residents who benefit would pay. Deanna did do a great job. It's far less than the estimate was, and so I'm going to vote in support of the resolution.
Mark, can I just ask a question about how this might impact the budget? So we've assumed that this money would be coming back, right? And is this out of capital or operating, or can you just explain what the impacts might be? And if you could do it for both this project and the park, Van Deventer project, if we were to fund those 100%?
The impact's going to be the $23,000 and the other $23,000. That will now have to be bonded, and you'll be paying the debt service on the bonding for those two, roughly about $50,000. I don't know what that actually would equate to, but that's roughly what you'll be doing.
Okay. All right, are there any more questions or comments before we vote? Okay. I think, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll on this one? I think it'll be simpler in the long run.
Ms. Howard?
No.
Mr. Liverman?
No.
Mr. Miller? No. Ms. Cremiller?
No.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
no?
Okay, so the resolution fails 5-1. And do we need to vote affirmatively then if the town is paying for it, or does that?
I think we have to cancel the assessments.
Yeah, we'll bring something back to you at the next meeting.
Okay.
Because right now you have an ordinance on the books that directs the municipality to only pay 50%, so if we're changing it, I've got to put a new
Okay,
instrument
so
together.
that will come back at the next meeting. Okay.
You might as well do the Poe Road one too, because I think that's outstanding too.
No, it's the,
Poe. We already decided as a group on Poe, but I just know because I'm on the Public Works that we haven't canceled it yet. I was just saying to save time, do that one too.
Mayor, is 4-2.
oh, it's 4-2. I miscounted.
What? No, it was 4-1.
I think there was one yes.
Ms. Howard?
No.
She was no? Yes. Okay, sorry.
Okay, so we're going to move on to reports, and then after reports, I'd like to get a show of hands what topics everybody's here for, and then we can move around the agenda a bit to hear from the items that people are here for, and then if you need to leave, you can. So I would like to call up our chief. Hi there. I can't see you when you sit on the table. For the February 2017 police report.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor.
I just have one brief explanation on the report itself. I wanted to kind of bring everybody's attention to the last 2 pages of the report. They're entitled Mercer County Prosecutor's Office Professional Standards Summary Report Form. So we are required by the Attorney General's Office to report our internal affairs statistics quarterly. And that's a public document that we give to them, and it's encouraged that we make that report public. So I thought it would be a good practice to include it in the monthly report quarterly when we complete it. And I am going to actually put in the next one an explanation with it and try to define. As I came upon this thought, it was too late for me to put together the document, but I'd like to put some background to what this report is, because I think it's good to show the public when there is a complaint, how it's processed, how it's accepted, and how it's adjudicated. So very briefly, the first form, and this is a standard form throughout the state, it gives an explanation of the complaints that were filed with our police department. It tells you what the complaint was categorized as on the left side, and then across the top it tells you how it was filed. Was it a citizen complaint? Did it come in anonymously? Was it generated within the agency? And then that number's totaled at the end. On the next page, again, these are all state standard dispositions. It gives a accounting of how each complaint was adjudicated. So upon investigation, was the complaint sustained? Was it an exonerated finding that obviously sustained is that there was a violation on our behalf, on the officer's behalf? Was the officer exonerated of the allegation? Was it not sustained, which means there wasn't enough proof one way or the other to substantiate or exonerate the complaint? Was it unfounded? And then you have administratively closed. That's where it starts to get complicated, and I think a brief explanation in the report would be good for the public to see how these things are accepted and how they're adjudicated. Again, it's all defined by the Attorney General's office, but I just thought, it's nice to see this transparently, that these complaints are taken, that they're seriously looked into, that there's a full investigation, and that they're reported publicly. So I just thought I'd bring your attention to that, and we'll start putting it in every quarter.
Thank you. And just for the public that's here tonight, the police reports are published they're part of our agenda packets, but you can also find them separately on the website.
Yes.
Mr. Limrin?
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Nick, this is a great report. I noticed it was one that said sustained. And any information on that one?
Sure. So a sustained would be, usually, I think in this case, actually, it was a demeanor complaint, if I see this correctly. Yes. So basically what happens is normally these complaints, and I don't have the information with me exactly on this incident, but they usually come in from an encounter where a citizen may say, I don't think maybe the officer was polite or professional, or maybe didn't conduct a traffic stop in the way we thought, or I think he should have or she should have. In that case, usually they're motor vehicle stops. That's the high preponderance of our encounters. We'll look at, our internal affairs officer will look at the video. And if in fact that officer wasn't as professional as we deem appropriate, we would enter it's based on our opinion, a finding of sustained, and then there would be remedial action after that. And that remedial action goes from everything from counseling and coaching to retraining to discipline, depending on what the allegations are. So, there's also, it's important to remember when the allegations are more serious, there's outside agency oversight. And I think that's very important for the public to understand, that when there's an allegation that rises to a level that's very serious, as outlined in the guideline, that complaint is forwarded to the prosecutor's office, and they then look at that investigation from an outside, so there's oversight there. And it's, I think a lot of people, it's a complicated process, but one that we're very, very used to and we're very trained on, and we're very serious about it. So I think it's good that the public knows that if they feel that service wasn't what they expected or that we didn't act properly, we're going to investigate it, and if we find that we didn't, we're going to address it, and we're going to report exactly what occurred.
Two questions. One, good news in the police report that all the overtime is down.
Yes.
And every dispatch, patrol, and detective, so that's great. Should we be expecting an increase this month because of all the activity? Which is good. We like all these marches and stuff. But are you able to handle, and with looking ahead to Community Day, do you think we're going to see overtime?
So, yeah, Communiversity will obviously generate some overtime from a special event perspective. The majority of our patrol overtime does generate from shortages that we encounter due to there's lots of things that go on during a shift, and we have a minimum amount of manpower that we require. So when that personnel strength drops below a certain level, we're required to bring somebody in, and that's all contractual. We've made some internal adjustments. We met with the PBA. We discussed a beneficial way to address both the needs of the officers and the overtime issue, and we came to a great understanding in which we've addressed that patrol shortages issue and how we address it, and that's going to result in usually a direct decrease in that overtime. So we think it's going to be sustainable, and we'll obviously keep an eye on it. But I did make that a priority this year. We just wanted to look. We're always looking at becoming more efficient. We're always looking at how we can be as effective or more effective and more efficient and save the taxpayers money, and we're always looking at that. So we're never in a box. We're never just going to do things because it's the way we've always done them. And this was kind of an example of how we did that internally.
Good. Well, thanks. Well, we'll know in a month, in a couple months. The other question is, there are a lot of people here in the audience tonight to talk about parking. We have an ordinance later on the agenda, but a separate parking issue that's come up at a couple meetings, and a couple of us have been talking about, is this issue of whether or not there's been a change in policy and how we handle, certainly in the people in my neighborhood in the former borough, or we're used to being able to call and saying, I have a guest, a family member who's visiting, can they park on the street overnight, and being able to, and not being ticketed. And then it seemed like perhaps there was a change. People were told no, and some tickets were given. And so wanted to sort of make sure we talked publicly about it, because it's obviously, as we know, parking issues are really important to people, and want to make sure we are clear about what our policies are going to be. And so, I mean, perhaps you could remind us about sort of how we got to where we are, and,
Yes.
and then we can think constructively.
That were complaining that they had permits and were buying permits to park, and that people, neighbors, people visiting, as it may be, were not being ticketed and parking on the street all night with no permits, and they were confused as to why weren't they subject to the same restrictions. On the other hand, so that's how this started, as a look to see, well, what's going on here. And in fact, that was happening, quite frankly. We were very lenient with the way we were enforcing what we would call emergencies or guests, people calling in, and it became I guess an operational leniency that we want to help people out. They're calling, and we were giving these permissions, and the unintended consequence was it became repetitive and very widespread, and it generated complaints from people that were working within the confines of the statute. We did a review of the statute. I talked to residents, and we realized, wow, there's got to be some type of adjustment to address these different issues. So what we had intended to do was explain to people that had been calling in regularly for permissions that, in fact, you're right. Your understanding probably is that you can just call the police and get permission, because we created that perception. But in fact, this is the ordinance, and this is the way that we actually have to operate, and this is why. And that created some miscommunication. So I felt felt that we certainly should get, it's a issue that there's people kind of on both sides of, and I don't want to say they're competing interests, but everybody has different lifestyles or that you may have, and parking requirements that they need. So I wanted to have this discussion publicly so that we could kind of get a consensus policy-wise what the town would like. We're open to anything. We want to make this work for everyone. Or it's not a matter of enforcement or issuing tickets. We want to help facilitate parking and address the different needs of the residents in the different areas of town, because the parking is different. The problem is the parking issues are different, the needs are different. We have to come to some type of policy that is fair and consistent to everyone, and we're finding that very difficult. Whichever direction we see ourselves trying to go in with regard to the ordinance, it seems to be uncovering other issues. So I'm here to absolutely try to work this out and listen. And
it's a brainstorm.
Yeah.
How do we move forward constructively, right? I mean, I think the thought, Jenny and I, if I can invoke your name, Jenny and I have been talking about this because she'd been hearing from people too, and it seems like we clearly need to fix the ordinance, but in the interim, can we return to the system that most people were familiar with if you have the operational capability, I think you and I were talking earlier, to prevent the abuses, the people who are calling, you said there were people who are literally calling it every night, acting like I just had somebody visit, and it's the 50th day in a row, so.
We can, yes, so the short answer to the question is we can do that. The thing that I just want to be completely transparent about would be that we can say someone has a guest, and they call up at 9 o'clock at night to our communication center. For us, it's very, we can do it. We can issue that permission, and that person could be granted the permission. I think the issue becomes the line of demarcation, if you will. At what point, and it's a real policy issue, so at what point do we say, and I just want to kind of be clear with everyone, no, you can't do this anymore, and we're not going to give you permission tonight, and there'll be a summons issued if the car's on the street. And it's, it opens up to some discretion on our part if it's not, policies are great because it limits discretion. This is one that I don't think there'll ever be, there's going to be some discretion. I just want to be as fair and consistent as we can be.
I have a recommendation, which would be starting tonight to start to track who's calling in. And I would think that it's important for us to fast track this ordinance and bump it up, even though it's not on our priorities for this year. I think it has emerged as a bit of a hot button issue that we do need to address. And so when people call in, maybe it's letting them know we're starting to track how many times you're calling in, and we don't know what that number is going to be, but you can't call in every night. And we're working on an ordinance, so if it's people who are calling in every single night, they should start looking for either figuring out how to get a permit or finding another spot in town. And meanwhile, we can work on the ordinance.
I think that's fine, but I do want to return to having a safety valve, because the stories I've just heard are people, a neighbor's in the hospital and another family member comes to help take care of the kids, so they have a third car for that night, and they're getting a ticket on the street. And when
you're right, and then the problem becomes is the ordinance is clear, right? So the ordinance is the permits are issued, and you can park here with the permit, and you can't park on the street unless you meet these criteria, and it's very clear. So what we ended up in a situation where we had gone so far this way, we were, I guess, found ourselves trying to reel it back and get back within the confines of the ordinance, and then that became very discretionary, depending on, although we gave direction on who was working in the communication center that night. It was a lot going on at one time. So we can certainly track it, and we can certainly make that explanation. Again, we are not in the business of trying to give anybody a hard time. It was weighing that.
Sure.
Those different interests.
Well, it looks like Jenny has the answer.
Well, yeah, we did, and I don't remember which other council member was involved, and maybe no other council member was involved, because we did have this discussion. Do you remember this, Deanna? We all, other towns across the country have this same exact scenario, and so at least one vendor, or else we reached out to a vendor, had a program for how to do this with, with computer reading I think it was very fancy and expensive, and we decided it wasn't worth the money. But at that time, I thought we had a discussion about what the limit would be, and it was something like 10 days or 14 days or something. So it really, I think all we need to do is come up with a limit of a certain number of days, and then put that on the books, and that would just memorialize, or whatever you call it, what's been going on for decades, right?
I think you're exactly right. So we have and that would make us feel more fair and consistent if it was codified, as opposed to us kind of winging it, if you will.
Yes, and it's always better to have a written policy than an unwritten policy. So, but I thought we had actually gone a little farther and created a little bit of a policy, but we must not have.
No, we didn't. We left in place the existing ordinance, which is 6 incidences where you can get a 1-week permit for $10 a week. But it does state that you park in one of our lots rather than on the street. So that's the other part that we need to modify if we're going to allow for the on-street parking.
And probably make that more widely known, too, because I didn't even know about that one.
I mean, that's right. I mean, communications is key here, because you're right. Some people know and have been taking advantage of it, and some people have no idea, right?
Yeah, I might recommend, since Heather and Jenny have spent some time on this, and it's a bit of public safety, a bit of parking committee, that the two of you get together and maybe have something ready for us for the next meeting, if it's simple. But in the meantime, when people call, I think we do want to be lenient and let people go back to what they were used to doing, but with that warning that we're starting to track, and that it's there's going to be, they don't want to use up all of their nights before our next meeting. Yeah.
So Chief, Jenny and I will work with you, and is this at least helpful to your operations?
Yeah, absolutely. We can, I feel much better about it. Like I said, I want to just have this discussion publicly. It makes it feel like it's completely transparent and everybody's on the same page. It makes it easier for us.
Thank you.
So we can, we'll take care of that tonight.
Thank you.
Ms. Carmel?
I just have one more question. I want to congratulate you too on the new report. I saw that and I was just really happy.
Great.
One more step.
One more step. Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I was also curious about and then you explained, that was good, I was curious about who is the authority. So is there an appeal process for people? I mean, if they say, oh, you're all sticking together. You're all sticking together, because I guess that's what they would say, right? I mean, some disgruntled citizen might say that.
Sure.
Then what do they do?
Sure. So we've had that over the years, I would say, and right away what I'll do is just briefly, so after the Internal Affairs officers investigate the complaint, it comes to me, and then I'll review the findings and either concur, modify, disagree, change, and if a person has and then I'll notify the complainant in writing and via telephone. If there's a unhappiness with our finding, I'll notify the prosecutor's office right away and say, as a courtesy, even though it's not the guideline, would you please review our findings, see if you find anything different? And I've never had them say no.
And I probably talk to the person too.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, thank you. 2 quick comments and then a question. I want to compliment you, the force, on the great job they did on Saturday. There were a lot of people, and it seemed very orderly, and appreciate your cooperation. And also on Friday night, the turnout, there was a nice show from the police department at Corner House, and Gary de Blasio was quite complimentary about how successfully Corner House works with the police, and I think that speaks highly of both organizations and our community.
Thank you.
My question is there anything we should know about the show of force that appeared in February? That there was a show of force incident, which we
I did have, it's actually, one use of force incident is probably low for us, which is a great thing in a month. I think if I look back, I want to say, the way use of force is reported could be confusing too, because you could have two officers engaged in an incident. It's one incident, but they each have to do a use of force report. So I think in this particular case, it was just one across the board.
Right, right. It was one person, one officer, and one incident.
And just to be clear, so you know how use of force works, I think I've explained this. It's a little bit confusing, but when there's any use of force by the state guideline of what use of force is defined as, we're required to do a report, a special report that gets forwarded to the prosecutor's office and the attorney general's office. We do it differently in Princeton. That review goes through 6 different internal steps that take place over a whole quarter of the year. When there's a use of force, it automatically is entered in our own internal database. It's automatically reviewed by the supervisor. We also require a supervisor to be on scene. That supervisor makes a finding in our database, which then goes to the lieutenant of the division, let's say it's patrol. That lieutenant reviews the use of force again. It then, another entry is made and it's referred to internal affairs. It's reviewed again, and then it comes to me. And then at the end of the quarter, it goes to our risk assessment committee. And our risk assessment committee is a peer review group that's comprised of officers from all ranks. And they review the incident, and they make a determination of was the action warranted, was it just, was it the proper amount of force applied, and most importantly, was there a way to avoid it? And after that's done, if it's determined that there was a better way to handle it, it's done through it, which usually by that point, it's already been addressed, but we're looking for, should we be examining things like different training, or does this officer need different training? Or what else can we do to positively address the issue? So I think we're probably, you may think it's over the top, but there's so many levels of review, and some of these incidents can be so complicated that having all those different sets of eyes on it does bring out a lot of different things. So even the most simplest, what you would think is mundane type of force, the most minimum use gets reviewed in that way. So it's good practice for us, and I think it's a really, really, really thorough and good review system. Sure.
Mr. Payne, did you? Yeah. I had one question for the chief. Could you talk about differential treatment and why a citizen might bring a charge of differential treatment?
Sure. Differential treatment is it's a category, if you will, and it embraces a lot of different types of complaints. The most basic type or most prominent type is where a person thinks that they were treated differently than someone else for a specific reason, whether it be ethnicity, race, an affiliation with, it could be anything. So if somebody comes into us and says, I feel that it could be something as simple as this. I feel that I got a speeding ticket on such and such a street because of this reason, and it's not because I was speeding. It's because I think the officer stopped me because of my ethnicity or my race. That generates an automatic internal affairs complaint, and those complaints I send automatically to the prosecutor's office for an initial review. Because I think that type of complaint requires, though I feel we are very objective and reasonable internally, the perception can be you're not going to investigate this fairly. So we automatically send that out for review. And then the prosecutor's office will review it and either investigate it there or say, okay, they'll contact the complainant, say they reviewed it, and they'll send it back to us for investigation.
Thank you. I mean, that's great to hear, especially the answers to the last two questions. I had a more mundane question. We had been tracking the time of day, the number of incidents that were happening each hour during the day, And I think this was a result of our discussion about the hours of operation ordinance. And now that we've passed that ordinance fully, I'm wondering if council feels like these numbers are useful. I feel like there's so much in this report that I'd rather have you guys spending time collecting data that we're actually using. And I would just as well lose that section, because my feeling is that some of that is hand entered, and this is the times of day, so you can see how many incidents happened between 1 and 2 a.m., between 2 and 3 a.m.
Well, are you keeping that anyway?
Yeah, so that's what I was just going to say.
Throw it
I
in.
agree with you, but just so you know, anything that we have is all public information. So all you would need to do is request it. It doesn't have to be monthly, and I can provide it. And so if you ever determine one day that you needed that for a specific reason, we can generate it. So maybe that's a better way of doing it if we need it for a specific reason.
If you're not doing it for our benefit, then you might as well throw it in. I mean, it doesn't.
It's kind of
hurt anything to have it.
interesting.
Yeah.
I mean,
Have you been looking at it?
I
mean,
do. I mean, the thing, I do look at it, and I have to admit, because I love statistics, and so I like looking at, and I also know, because I went on the ride-along, that, the cops keep track of every little thing. So I
Right,
know,
no,
and so I think they just generate a little table, but if it's a lot of work, no, don't do it.
Right, I would say if it's, it's hard for me to tell how much work these different things are. I feel like sometimes if there's too much information in here that's extraneous, it can obfuscate the information that's really important for us to be focusing on and that the public would be interested in. So I remember just the genesis of putting that in here, but if it's,
Okay.
I don't feel
It
super
doesn't
strong.
really
No.
to me either. I don't care if you want to take it out.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, we can move on to other reports then. Ms. Howard, any reports?
Yes, 2 brief reports. Just want to, today I had the great fortune of participating in an Arbor Day event with the mayor and Councilman Quinn at Riverside Elementary. So I just want to applaud Lorraine Knopka, our arborist, did an amazing job with the 3rd graders there, planting a tree and educating the kids about the importance of trees to our ecosystem. So kudos. I see Bob Huff is here. Kudos to Lorraine. It was a great event. And I think there are still a few more coming, right, Mayor? And so I commend those to my colleagues. The second quick update for colleagues is, you'll recall when we did our agenda setting for this year, we talked about perhaps at some point getting involved in this, in creating a health and all policy for the town. And what we decided was that we wanted to spend this year in investigating and learning more about what that would entail and what that would mean for the municipality. And so I just wanted to report that we have a subcommittee of the Board of Health that Jeff Grosser and I are meeting with to sort of brainstorm about what that would mean, and we'd love to be able to, this summer or fall, report back, Jeff, right, on what we think this means and whether we have any recommendations for council. So no action now, but just know that we have it, that we've been talking about it. Yes?
I think I missed. I think I
Health
missed
in all
the 2.
policies.
A what?
Health in all policies.
Health and all. Okay.
Which is basically how do you infuse decision-making, our municipal decision-making, with a concern for impact on the health of the community.
Ms. Lippert, Mr. Miller? Ms. Cornell?
I just wanted to report that the Planning Board Master Plan Subcommittee is having a meeting on, well, it's actually, now that I think about it, maybe it's not, it hasn't been scheduled, but I believe it's going to be scheduled on May 15th. Do you know, has it been scheduled for the campus plan? Oh, you did? Oh.
May 15th.
Sorry. Just to reiterate. Sorry. Okay. Oh, it has been scheduled. Okay.
Ms. Butler, any reports?
I don't have a report, but I do have a question for Mark. When do we expect the capital budget back on the agenda? Because there are a couple of projects, Mary Moss Park, we need to get,
Actually, just for the answer for Mary Moss Park, I believe that has been already bonded for, so I think we're okay there.
It doesn't need capital improvement. And I also had a question today at lunch about the Emerald Ash Borer that we need,
Yes.
they need that money too.
Just in terms of the capital budget, you will be seeing that come back to you guys at the next meeting. Coming back to you at the next meeting, and I foresee the meeting after that we'll be looking at, or after that would be the actual introduction of bond ordinances.
Actually, Mark, isn't there a review by the financial?
That would be in May 1st.
Is that right?
The first Monday in May.
Yeah.
Mr. Quinn, any reports? Okay, I have a couple reports. The first is that the website group is continuing to meet, and we're almost ready with the RFP to send that out. So that's exciting that that project is moving. And at the last historic preservation meeting, I have a couple things to report. One is really exciting. There's a project for the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, the Witherspoon-Jackson Heritage Trail, and Shirley Satterfield has been working together with Bob Hillier on putting together about 24, identifying about 24 sites and creating placards for those. The HPC viewed one of the examples of that. It's a really nicely designed placard, and a lot of the sites are ones for those who've taken Shirley's tour that are on her tour, and I think it'll be really great addition and help bring that history to the street level and help educate both residents and visitors. And the Mercer Hill neighborhood is put together some recommendations for possible markers for historic homes, and they're still working on what that might be. But just to let folks know, that discussion is happening.
How will those be funded for the?
For the Heritage Trail, the idea would be there'd be a sponsor for each of the placards, and I think he's already.
Will also have their name on the plaque.
That have their name on the plaque. It's very tastefully done, and I think the one he showed us already had a sponsor. I don't know if that sponsor knew that they were sponsoring. But yeah, no, the intention would have it be privately funded, although we haven't been asked to be one of the sponsors.
We just spent $50,000 on sidewalk.
But I would say that the Mary Moss Playground is one of the sites, so if I would encourage you to reach out to Elizabeth if you haven't already, just to get the mock-up and identify a spot in the playground that would be appropriate for it.
Okay, we've had that discussion in our group, and I think even with some people, that it wouldn't be in the park per se, it'd be on the outside of the park. We don't want to attract people into the park.
Right, and that would make more sense anyway, because most of the other ones, it's more, you're walking on the sidewalk, so you want it to be visible from the sidewalk. Okay, are there any staff reports? Deanna?
Yes, I've got a couple of items. Just to give you an update on the municipal roadway paving schedule, we had initially been scheduled to do the final paving on Mountain and Great Road with the pathway and the road intersection this week, but because of weather, that is pushed off most likely to next week. That same contractor will be paving Snowden and Valley for us as well. So once they complete the Mountain Great project, they will move on to the Snowden Lane and Van Dyke where we did the sanitary sewer work. And I'm not sure if Peter Madison is here, but he'll be happy to hear that piece of Snowden Lane from Smoyer Park to Overbrook will be resurfaced. And then after that work is done, they will go to Valley and do the final paving on Valley Road. Timing works out well because if you do go ahead and award the spring planting contract, we're coordinating with Lorraine to get the trees installed on Valley Road before we do the final paving, so there's no chance of marring the surface. Other road projects or road paving work that's taking place, we have been notified by New Jersey DOT that they have issued a permit to the development at 255 Nassau Street to pave that area where the road is crisscrossed with utility cuts on Wednesday night into Thursday morning. So they have approved a nighttime project beginning at 9 p.m., extending until 6 a.m. on Thursday. Police have coordinated with them. Traffic should be maintained through the work area, and they will have one Princeton police officer on site during the work hours to address any issues that come up. Another topic of discussion lately has been the Montgomery paving on Cherry Valley Road, and they're also working on Princeton Avenue, so two roads that are right on our borders with Montgomery. And they've been doing some repairs on Montgomery. Montgomery's been doing repairs on Cherry Valley Road. That was initially scheduled for today and tomorrow, but with the weather impacts, it's been delayed at least until Wednesday. We have, while the work is being done with a Montgomery contractor, Princeton Police has been called in to help supervise the traffic control and make sure that we have the appropriate signage and notifications in place. So we've been working on it, and thank you, Mayor, for also following up with the Montgomery mayor for us. Hopefully we'll make some progress to make sure communications are clear out there. Two other items. I had advised at a previous meeting that Mercer County, as of September, is no longer going to be maintaining our traffic signals for us. So I've been working with the county and our other municipalities in Mercer County to look at what our options are. The county is putting together a template for an RFP, a request for proposals, for us to use either singly or through some sort of a shared services contract with maybe the other municipalities in Mercer County and or the university to go out to bid for these services. So I'll keep you up to date on that progress, but as of September this year, they will no longer maintain our traffic signals for us.
About how many are there that are county owned? Do you know?
I think there's about 32 signals in town, but some of them are maintained by DOT. Some of the former borough signals were maintained by DOT, so I don't have the exact count. And then one last item is Nelson Nygaard came in last week and conducted a day and a half of stakeholder meetings for the parking study. Got a lot of feedback. We had the public open house at the Monument Building. Again, a lot of public feedback. In the first 9 days of the parking survey that's on SurveyMonkey, they received over 700 responses. So I encourage everybody to go onto the municipal website. There's a tab on the right side of the page. It says Princeton Parking Study, and it has the presentation material that people saw at the open house on the 19th, as well as our council meeting on the 19th. And it also has a draft inventory plan on it as well. And there's the link to the survey. So you can vote many ways on the survey. You don't have to just do one survey. You can say, you know, if you're an employee, if you're a resident, if you're a shopper, you can take the survey 3 different times if you fall under different classifications. So,
Great, thank you.
that's it. Thank you.
Any other reports? Mr. Smith?
One thing I just want to advise council, and I know they've seen it earlier in my Friday report, the Waxwood development discussion has been postponed to May 8th as we gather additional information. The subcommittee on that issue met last Thursday and reviewed some issues, some additional information that we need, and we'll provide that to council and have our discussion on the 8th.
Ms. Carla?
Well, I wanted to talk about one issue that is still unresolved as far as the Waxwood development, and that's whether or not the policy of marketing and renting the units or selling them to the neighborhood or their descendants, as the agreement currently states, is legal or not. Because there's been some people who say that's not legal, we shouldn't be doing it. Others are saying it's a gray area, but I looked up in the discrimination law, and I don't see anything about it being illegal. You can't discriminate against protected classes, but discrimination per se is legal. In fact, I also found out, at least on the state website, that you're allowed to discriminate against age in housing. So I would like, and Mr. Hillier said he would suggest that we ask our lawyer because he didn't want to do the research, I guess. So I think it's important when we make the decision to find out if that is even legal or not. Because the way we've been saying it, everybody's been acting as though it's illegal. But if it's illegal, we shouldn't do it. And if it's legal, we should do it.
Thank you. That was a good comment. I just wanted to add one last report. We issued an announcement last week, but just in case people hadn't heard, and also to put it on the record, I did want to announce that we have reached a settlement in principle with Fair Share Housing Center regarding Princeton's Fair Share affordable housing obligation. And we're currently working on the details of that settlement, on finalizing them. And once we do have those details finalized, we will be sharing them publicly. And we anticipate that process hopefully to take a few weeks or less. All right. Any other reports? All right. If not, then we will. I did want to pause and just get a sense from everybody who's here. Can you raise your hand if you're here for the overnight parking ordinance? Okay. And then if you're here and would like to speak on an issue that's not the overnight parking ordinance, can you just raise your hand? And are you here for the Herrontown, the open space? Okay. Given that that is likely to be a little faster, I would entertain a motion to amend the agenda to hear ordinance number 2, which is 2017-16 next, and then following that, ordinance 2017-18 after that, and then resume with the rest of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Liverman, seconded by Ms. Krummeller. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So we'll take up then ordinance 2017-16, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton accepting the dedication for open space purposes of a 7.526 acre parcel abutting the Herrontown Woods Arboretum. And are there any questions from council before we open up the public hearing? All right, seeing no one, I'll open up the public hearing, and I would ask if you do plan to speak, if you could come and line up behind the microphone in respect to everybody else so that we can be more efficient. And, yeah, please come up. And then I'd ask that you hold your remark to 3 minutes, please.
I can do that. Steve Hiltner again. We have 3 supporters here. Who I guess, well, maybe one will speak. Otherwise, I will speak for any who want to listen. It's a wonderful property. I've been in contact with the developer. He seems very enlightened about environmental stuff, and we're delighted that he clustered his property so that 7.5 acres will be available. It's a very important property for Herrontown Woods. It's on our nature walk yesterday, you just go a little ways past the parking lot and you see all these orange stakes, and that's where this property is. It's right on the edge of one of the main trails, the Red Trail. And it also straddles the two streams that converge within it and then head down. So it's directly downstream of Herrontown Woods and would be an excellent addition. I think if Wendy Mager was here, she would say that, you know, the Friends of Princeton Open Space is hoping to get a trail down to Van Dyke through there, and this would be a great addition also. I do want to say also that, you know, in siting trails and trying to figure out where trails should be, you have to look at the land, you know, throughout the year to figure out where the wet spots are. And so if the homeowners association was to take this, it would, and we just have a narrow right-of-way for the trail, it would be very difficult to say just where that should be. So it really helps to own the property, and I know that the 4 neighbors who live next to it are delighted with the prospect of Princeton taking this on. And of course our group, the Friends of Herrontown Woods, is, as you can see, is very committed to taking care of this property and see this as a wonderful addition. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tina Cotillo, 79 Dempsey Avenue. My family and I have been coming to Herrontown Woods for 20 years, and before I had a family, I came to Herrontown Woods. I think this piece of Herrontown Woods is superly interesting and very different from the other pieces of Herrontown Woods. And my family had one particularly memorable day there where my daughters launched a bottle cap, which they named Jerry, down the stream. And I'm here to say that it is a great addition to the rest of Herrontown Woods, and to me, it's a no-brainer. Let's just do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe Bidalis, 14 Southern Way, for the last 27 years. And all I want to say is that I support what the previous 2 speakers have said. It's hard for me to imagine that we would get any consistently good support of those 7+ acres by the few members of a homeowners association.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody who'd like to speak as part of this public hearing? All right, if not, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Ms. Krummeller?
Yeah, I don't know if the speakers realize that under the agreement with the developer, either way, whether the township, whether the municipality took ownership or whether the homeowners took ownership, the developer is required to make the space public, provide parking in its cul-de-sac, and not only that, but to construct and create the trails. So I support retaining, taking advantage of that money and resources that the developer is going to, has to do under the agreement. I didn't get a cost for constructing a trail, but I think it's probably no small amount of money to construct a trail. Under the agreement, there's also a requirement that the developer works with the municipality for a mutually agreed place. The trail is placed to the municipality's liking. So given those things, I think we can have our cake and eat it too. The town would not have the liability of that space. So we maintain the trails. We don't really want people walking off the trails anyway, right? In the old growth woods, it's better to stay on the trail so you don't damage the wildlife habitats. So I also love the open space and the trails, and I believe we should retain ownership and take advantage of the money and resources that we would get from the developer. Furthermore, we have parks that are under-maintained right now. In particular, I'm aware of one that I think affects a lot more people, and there's a little patch on Spruce Street that's part of Quarry Park, and it's a beautiful, or potentially beautiful, piece of old growth woods that is overgrown with invasive species. And we just haven't, the municipality hasn't been able to get around to clearing it. So I think if we take on this new additional portion of land where we'll end up needing to clear it of invasive species, that's a really hard thing to do. I think we should get as much as we can from the developer as possible, and that's why I'm advocating this. It's not because I have anything against open space.
I'm totally opposite. And, we've had this discussion before, and it's no need me to go into a length of detail, but I can't believe if somebody's given us so many acres that we're not going to accept it. It won't cost the town, and I understand Jenny's explanation. It won't cost us.
Why won't it cost the town? Are we going to get a trail for free?
Well, we're getting volunteers.
Who's going to construct the trail for free?
I'm assuming that the volunteers, the Herrontown, the Friends of Herrontown Woods have come forward and said that they would maintain these trails for us. They have done a great job so far. It's a strong volunteer base. I mean, I think that if they're coming forward, I mean, we're trying to get more people to do more volunteering. We're trying to get more citizenship, more people involved in the town. We have a great base of people here willing to work. To say, no, we don't want to accept this land and so forth, I don't see why we would do that. So you don't have to vote yes, I'm fine with it, I understand the whole conversation, but for me, I just don't see why we wouldn't do that.
Okay. Ms. Butler?
I just want to agree with my colleague Jenny Krummiller. I support Herrontown Woods. I hope we can save the Veblen House, but we will have all the benefits of that open space without being the owners of it. And I do imagine that the neighbors are delighted with the idea that the municipality would take this on because it comes off the tax rolls. And so there's this large piece of property that benefits, it'll benefit some people that walk through it, but it is a huge benefit to those tax owners to be free of that liability. And so when we can get all of the benefits for the municipality without owning it, I think we ought to do that.
Okay. Ms. Howard?
Mayor, I just wanted to bring it, just in speaking with Jack on the agreement. The agreement will allow the developer will build the trail either way. It's the maintenance that we would be responsible for paying for.
Tonight we took on about $50,000 worth of sidewalk that's not in our budget. I mean, just.
Ms. Howard?
I mean, I know we've discussed it, but just to be on the record, I support this because I do think it will be a resource that will be driven by the entire community. So I think it's an opportunity to expand the resource for the community, and just maybe we're coming off a great weekend, and I heard from a lot of people who were out and about, and so I think we honor and encourage people to be more involved, and so I'm pleased to support.
I just repeat my support for this. Mr. DeShields, I thank you for clarifying that the trail will be cut either way. It's the question of maintenance, and in just my anecdotal experience, and not to tar every homeowners association, but I think I take a group of dedicated nature-loving volunteers over a homeowners association pretty much any day.
But let me just say, in the absence of volunteers, It's us. It's all the taxpayers. Like, you cannot count on volunteers. They're rebuilding the house. You know, there isn't an unlimited supply of volunteers, and particularly,
You know,
it's our equipment. Don't kid yourself. It's a lot.
I also read the agreement as, I think it's ambiguous. I mean, can we make sure before we finalize this, and if they're not going to build the trail, we should know that. I mean, I guess you guys don't care, but when I read the agreement, I didn't read it that way.
Okay. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Cramiller?
No.
Ms. Butler?
No.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Okay, the ordinance passes 4-2. My math the same as yours?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you. And now we move to the main item for tonight, which is the public hearing for ordinance 2017-18, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton concerning overnight parking and applicable permit criteria, and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And before we open up the public hearing, I just wanted to say a couple words about the process. I wanted to let Jenny Crummiller say a few words as a member of the parking committee, and then Deanna and Jack are professionals. You'll just go through the details of what's involved here, and then we'll open up the public hearing so we can make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. And we're going to start with the list that people had signed up on before the meeting, and then we'll open it up to anybody else who would like to speak. There's been a lot of work on the parking ordinances, especially this past year by the parking committee. They don't have an enviable task. What they've been asked to do is look at the ordinances in the former township and in the former borough and try to make some sense of how to combine them so we're treating everybody fairly. We have heard an outpouring from the community. Many of you came to the meeting last week with the parking consultants. I've been receiving a lot of email. I'm sure my colleagues have been receiving a lot of email too. So I just wanted to start this off by saying we hear you. We know there are a lot of concerns. The options in front of council tonight are to do an up and down vote on the ordinance. We may also decide to wait until after the results of the parking study come in. With that, we do want to hear from all of you and turn things over to Jenny for some background comments.
Okay, so you kind of introduced the subcommittee. So the challenge of rationalizing the parking rules in the township and the borough in the Witherspoon neighborhood have been the thorniest. Tonight we're considering two issues, and we may want to separate them out. The number of permits given per residence and whether to charge for permits. The first issue, to reduce the number of permits, was an issue that there was some disagreement about on the subcommittee. The staff recommended that we harmonize the borough and township down to the boroughs to be fair, and so there was no arbitrary boundary within the neighborhood. And we felt that we should, to make that a little easier, we thought we should grandfather the change. However, I'm sure we're going to have a vigorous discussion about that. The second issue was whether to charge for parking, and there's no disagreement on the committee about that one. Everywhere in downtown areas, but especially in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, parking spaces are a limited resource. The former borough has a permit program to allocate spaces whereby some residents can purchase permits to park on the street where they live or in one of the municipal lots overnight. The township has a free permitting program in that neighborhood. As far as I understand, there is no free permanent parking provided by the municipality anywhere else in downtown areas. The committee felt that the borough approach is a rational and fair approach for a number of reasons. The cost of vehicle ownership for all other properties in the municipality includes paying for a parking space through the cost of real estate and higher taxes for properties with driveways. Private vehicle parking should not be subsidized by the general taxpayer, but rather borne by the owners of the vehicles. Housing without parking is more affordable to those without the means to own one or more cars. As concerns for vehicle emissions and their contribution to global warming, as well as Princeton's traffic problems have grown, and as we have been emphasizing the need for walkable and bikeable communities, the committee is clear that the municipality should not provide free permanent parking spaces on public rights-of-way. That was especially the last paragraph was my little editorial paragraph, so the other members of the parking committee might want to add something or
I'm on the parking committee, I'm on the ordinance committee. Just to say something generally, because we have gotten a lot of email with a fair amount of misinformation. And I think it might be helpful just to talk about the way we've looked at harmonizing these ordinances. We're not harmonizing always to the borough, we're not harmonizing always to the township. Several weeks ago, we went through a process where we looked at home ownership. And what we do is to look at both ordinances in both towns and decide which fits most of the municipality now, the consolidated municipality, under current conditions. We haven't tried to rewrite the code from the start. We really haven't tried to kind of re-envision every single ordinance. We really have picked one, either the former boroughs or the former townships. We've done a little bit of tweaking, but then we've tried to harmonize them. So, for example, in the case of the home ownership, we thought the borough, home occupation, thank you, home occupation, we thought the former borough ordinance better reflected what would be acceptable to the whole town. We didn't rethink home occupation too much. We tweaked it a little bit, and that's what we went with. And it's, in a certain sense, we're doing the same thing with this parking ordinance. We looked at the way both municipalities treated what we considered to be the same neighborhood. It wasn't done out of concern for any commercial interests or development that might be going in on Witherspoon. It really was just an effort to bring what we considered to be one neighborhood into under one ordinance.
Okay. Oh, you want to
Simply
say
say
something?
that as the third member of the parking committee, I looked at this from a public policy standpoint, and that is that there is an issue of equity and an issue of fairness that's involved here. Parking has been extensively studied by academics over the last few years. And there's an academic by the name of Donald Shoup, S-H-O-U-P, and I would recommend you to read his work if you want to take the time to do so. But I'll give you the title of one of his papers. It's titled The High Cost of Free Parking. It goes back to a very basic principle. There ain't no free lunch. And those that park free, we all pay the cost for. So I would suggest that there is an equity issue that has to be considered and a fairness issue, and that everyone should be treated in exactly the same way.
Okay, thank you. Now I'd like to turn it over to our professionals just to remind us what exactly is in this ordinance proposal, and then we'll open up the public hearing.
Sure, there's quite a few things that we've touched on in this ordinance. Just to start at square one, to describe the differences between the borough and the township parking ordinances that exist right now. So in the memo that we provided as part of the agenda packet, we've created a table that outlines these differences. So the former borough limited overnight parking permissions to the residential zones on the street that you reside, where the township's permit program specifically named streets: Lee, Birch, Race, John. The borough requirement was 1 permit per dwelling unit if you do not have off-street parking. The township was more lenient, providing 2 permits per dwelling if you don't have off-street parking, 1 permit if you do have off-street parking. Township permits were for free. You did not have to register. They were valid for 1 year. They were automatically mailed out. The borough permits are $30 a quarter. Residents have to come in, register, provide the license plate number, proof of residency, and the permits were only valid for a quarter. Timeframes are also different. The township permit extended beyond the overnight hours. It also granted an exemption to the 2-hour parking limit that exists on most of the streets in the neighborhood. There are 2 streets in the neighborhood that do not have a 2-hour time limit within the Witherspoon-Jackson, but for the former township streets, they all had the 2-hour limit and permit holders were exempt. So going back to walk you through what's actually in this ordinance, the former borough ordinance had defined overnight parking as anything between 2 to 6 a.m., but there was a 1-hour leniency where you could park on any former borough street within any former borough street. And so what we have removed that in this ordinance. Speaking with police, it became just an enforcement nightmare. So it's very clear now that no parking 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. unless you have a permit. And so with that, we looked at where the existing permits in the former borough have been issued, which would signify where there are no off-street parking opportunities. And we established a list of roadways where we can say that there's no overnight parking specifically on those roadways without a permit. We also have to harmonize the borough and the township issues. What's being recommended in this ordinance is to extend the permit fee to the former township permit holders. This would, we would keep the number of permits that the former township residents have in place until such time as the property changes hands, and they would maintain the daytime exemption. It would require, though, that all of those former township people that have permits would have to register their vehicles for those permits. And then one other piece that we've added in is establishing the criteria to provide reduced cost permits to those who qualify, and there's a list of the various types of programs that if you participate in these programs, then you get a 50% reduction on the parking rate. So that's what, after 2.5 years, almost 3 years of working with the parking subcommittee, with police, with the clerk's office, this is the latest harmonization ordinance for the residential parking permits.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to say anything? Okay. Okay, are there any questions from council before we open up the public hearing?
Mayor, I do have 2 quick questions. Chief, if we cut off the parking at 2 a.m., how are we going to accommodate workers who in the restaurant business who, I mean, that's why we had the 1 hour switch we had the 1 hour grace period in the borough, is so that people who closed a bar at 2 o'clock had a chance to close up and get to their car.
It's a valid point. Internally, speaking internally in the police department, we were discussing this as recently as today. I don't, just to throw out there, it could be helpful to push that time a little bit to account for that, which might be the easiest fix.
I know that police aren't comfortable with things that aren't ordinance.
Well,
so
yeah.
I don't want you, but I didn't know whether there was some agreement to give a grace period or whether you're going to.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to. It's hard for the officer to answer your question very directly. It's hard for the officer to know the car that's parked there who it belongs to. So, quite frankly, it's going to get if the officer's enforcing the ordinance at that point and the car doesn't have a permit, it would get a summons.
Okay. My second question, Deanna, I see that we moved over in the, and I know I agreed to this, and now I can't remember what the answer was. Over in the Institute area, remember that the parking ban goes until 10 a.m., but we couldn't quite figure out why 10 a.m. and not 8 a.m. or something. Did we ever get an answer to why it's that funny time?
No, we never came, we kind of left that out of this proposed ordinance, so we didn't really pursue what that reasoning was.
I thought is that not included, that's harmonized in here, I think. I thought, I was looking it over again today, I thought it was in there.
No,
that is not in here?
That's
The
not in
Institute?
there.
I don't know where I read that, okay.
No, what we did is, there are a couple of former borough roads within that,
right,
within those zones.
Yes.
And what we did is we took those pieces of the former roads and put them into the former township.
So we did shift them. Okay,
We did
I'm not
shift
crazy, it
those,
was in
right.
there.
So
All
the
right.
little piece of Battle and I think the little piece of Springdale.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. All right, so with that, I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance. And the way we'll structure this is we'll start with the sign-up sheet, and then we'll open it up to anybody else who'd like to speak. So I'm going to call up folks 3 at a time, and if you just come to the mic, and then we'll call up the next group. So the first group will be Catherine Millett, Christina Corvin, and Mark J. Sampsey. Sorry if I'm butchered your name. What is it? Oh, and yeah, if you can try to keep your comments to 3 minutes, please, so that everybody gets a chance.
Thank you, and I have a copy to submit for the record. Dear fellow Princeton residents, I'm Catherine Millett, and since August 1st, 2003, I have resided at 258 John Street. My driveway was the dividing line between the former borough of Princeton and the township of Princeton. In 2003, when I purchased my property, I bought it with the understanding that I would park in the driveway I shared with Mr. Felipe Cruz's property at 260 John Street. Until Mr. Cruz sold his property in 2016, I shared the driveway with his tenants, and I occasionally requested overnight parking for guests by calling the police department and providing the license plate number. In 2016, Ms. Tamara Budek and Mr. Patrick Marchand purchased 260 John Street as a rental property. They inform me that they do not wish to share the driveway, but rather have the driveway be only for, quote, drop and load purposes. Since January 25th, 2017, I have attached the residential sticker in my car and been parking on the street. I enjoy living on John Street in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood. I have never regretted my decision to move to this neighborhood. During my residency, I've witnessed this neighborhood becoming an increasingly popular place to dine, such as Tortuga's Mexican restaurant, as well as to park. Princeton University construction workers during the Stanworth construction, and people who want to enjoy the Palmer Square and Princeton University activities. Tonight, I would like to make 5 recommendations for your consideration as the residential parking in Princeton is being evaluated. These recommendations are informed by my own parking experiences in Somerville, Massachusetts, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Ann Arbor, Michigan. And in here I have provided copies of their current residential and visitor parking programs. First, I would encourage you to provide parking options for Princeton residents without driveways so that it should be a priority for the municipality of Princeton. Second, a residential parking program should allow for vehicles owned by residents to park unlimited hours, in other words, 24-hour parking, unless otherwise posted, such as street cleaning times or snow emergencies. Third, the parking program should accommodate the needs of each licensed driver in a residential household, provided they can show proof of residency. Princeton residents should not be limited to one residential parking permit. This would be unfair and not given probably to other residents who have other cars. Fourth, visitor parking. Princeton residents should be eligible for up to 2 visitor parking permits per household, regardless of whether they have a resident parking permit. These passes should be available when residents receive their residential parking sticker or if they apply just for overnight parking. This would avoid having to call the police or come to a municipal building. I do want to echo some of the sentiments of earlier speakers tonight. I feel terrible calling the police to ask for parking when somebody might be calling to get an ambulance. That's not in the record, but I really do have to say that tonight. The Cambridge and Somerville materials provide a good model for how a visitor parking program could be developed and implemented in Princeton. Fifth, the price of the parking program should be reasonable. In Somerville, Massachusetts, the cost is $40 for the year. In Ann Arbor, Michigan, the cost is a $50 annual fee per resident vehicle, and it can be reduced to $15 when you reapply if you bring in your old parking permit. And in Cambridge, Mass, the cost is $25 for the initial resident parking permit, and it also includes the visitor parking permit per household. I want to thank you for this opportunity, and I hope that you will take into consideration not only my comments, but the speakers who follow me. I don't think we're asking for special treatment. I think we're just asking that in the places where we live, these are, in some instances, the very oldest part of the town in ways that my house was built in 1927 when people just didn't have a lot of cars. I have no space to think about parking other than the street. And I, for safety purposes, do not want to have to be asking for a taxi to take me home from another garage or something like that. So I appreciate this opportunity to speak, and I can give Ms. Williams this testament. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's a hard act to follow. So first of all, I want to point out that treating people fairly does not necessarily mean treating them equally. This is not a town that you can say everybody is the same. Where you live, maybe off of Mercer Street or in the section you were just speaking of, it's a completely different place than the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood. And, you know, the reason why there was a township and a borough in the first place is because you cannot say that we are the same. Lee Avenue is not downtown, and I've heard Lee Avenue referred to as downtown several times, and I live there, and I can tell you it's not downtown. And I can also tell you that I have not seen a horrible problem on our street. The horrible problem is that some people are paying and some people aren't. And also the horrible problem is that when we got to sell our house, there's going to be one parking space for that house. Now, if we were going to be purchasing a house in this neighborhood, we would have to decline, and we wouldn't be able to live in Princeton. This is the only neighborhood that we can afford in Princeton. We love living here, but we are a family with 2 preschool kids and 2 working adults, and we just simply cannot live without 2 cars, and it would just cause undue hardship for us. And let's see, what else did I want to say? Oh, my time's up. But I did send you a letter, and thank you very much. And I also wanted to take the moment to thank Deanna and Dolores for being so kind at the open house parking. Oh, one more thing that's very important. Why are you talking about an ordinance now when you just hired a consulting firm? Why don't you wait and get the feedback from the consulting firm? Because that looks very suspicious for us when you don't even wait to hear what their results are before you introduce this ordinance that seems really unfair. And, you know, a lot of the former borough residents think that's ridiculous too. Why can't they park on the street? So why make it easier for everybody? Why are you causing undue hardship for your residents? You are elected officials, and you should try to be making it easier for us. Just because you have 2 places to park doesn't mean that we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Sampsey and Dr. Melisso. We live at 67 Pine Street, and we've really enjoyed coming and moving into Princeton. We've been abiding by the ordinance where when we have 3 children that have left the home, graduated college, but occasionally they do come back for food usually. So when they do come back, we've abided by the rules and called in to the police and got our the overnight sticker. The concern that we have is the other night. We did call in and we were told the overnight parking was disbanded. Our Mary's son had to go down and park down at the Spring Tree garage, and in the morning paid $23 to get his car out, which is over a mile from 67 Pine Street. So we just wanted to talk about the fact that we like the system where you're able to call in when there is a guest who's there. Although the thing that does concern us is, although our kids are out of the house, they might come back at some particular point in time, and if they do come back, it would be more than a 2-person car family, potentially 3, and now all of a sudden, what do we do with that child who has a car, and where does he or she park?
Right, right. And, you know, they're treating family members as if they're guests. I have to get a guest parking permit, and it's only allowed a few times a year. My daughter's registration for her car is 67 Pine Street, but if she goes out and she wants to park overnight, she has to go up 0.8 miles away to the Spring Street garage and walk back by herself or get an Uber. I don't understand the rationale of allowing one parking. You're willing to even pay for it. I'm willing to pay for it. And I'm told only 1 car per residence. I think most people in Princeton probably have more than 1 car. So I don't understand why only 1 permit. It should be registered, car owner in that home should be able to, if they don't have a drive. Otherwise, we have to go a mile to park. And if that's going to be the issue, then develop areas where we can park that's closer, but it's too far. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to call up the next set of speakers, Debbie Peaks, Sarah Torian, and Paloma Mascardo.
Hi, I'm Debbie Pikus, and I live at 24 Lee Avenue, and I've written to all of you, and I'm going to just formally register my opposition. We put together a petition and spent 2 hours. Every person we talked to in the neighborhood was vehemently opposed and frankly very upset about the political system that would lead to something that was so disproportionately hit our neighborhood. You guys got over 80 signatures, and that was just in a 2-hour window. We didn't go back to houses, and that's a lot of people who obviously are immigrants and might not sign a petition. Every single person was upset about the message it sends about our neighborhood. We are not downtown Princeton. We are too far. Many of us walk. We bike to work when we can. I run with a jogging stroller to my son's daycare. It's 1.7 miles away. We've got 2 working people, a small child. Grocery shopping is exorbitant if you don't go out of Princeton. We have play dates, activities, swim lessons. We could not live our lives. We never, as Christina said, we never would have bought in this neighborhood if we thought we were at some point going to have 1 car. It's not fair. Frankly, the people in the neighborhood are saying there are a bunch of people that are making a decision, come talk to us about our problems. We don't have problems parking. We get parking spots. There's tons of empty parking spots on the rest of the neighborhood closer into town. What problem are we solving? You guys are, this ordinance is creating a huge problem for people that have small children, elderly. I mean, even a lot of the women work from home. We see this as it's against so many, it would make it very difficult because we work from home most of the time, but we need access to our cars. So what would we do? People who actually go to work every day and use their cars could park at the school and then leave during the day. We can't do that because we're working from home. So, I mean, even though many of us have 2 cars, we probably drive a lot less than people in other neighborhoods do, and we feel like we're in support of green activities, but why is it coming on our shoulders? Like, we can have the 2 cars, we can walk and bike and take the bee. I'm sure many of you have never done those things from your neighborhoods. You have probably 2, 3 cars and plenty of space for it. So why is this hitting us? And there's a sense that this is the poorest neighborhood in Princeton, and yet this ordinance is disproportionately hitting people, a lot of people who are just trying to get by.
Thank you.
Hello. What's up? My name is Sarah Torian, and I live at 56 Lee Avenue, and I am here to voice my strong opposition for the proposed parking ordinance, like most of the folks here as well. The fact that it would require people living who are on income-eligible public assistance programs, temporary assistance for needy families, affordable housing, Medicaid, to pay even $1 for a parking permit is, to me, just beyond egregious. And it flies in the face of statements I've read from many of you in the newspapers about wanting to protect and preserve economic diversity in this town. Forcing these low-income families to pay $60 a year might not seem like a burden to you, but it is a significant burden to families that are working multiple jobs and living paycheck to paycheck and barely making ends meet. And keep in mind that there's a lot of folks in our neighborhood who don't qualify for those programs, but yet are still just above that line and still struggling to make ends meet. And this $120 a year charge would be a burden for them. For the past 5 years, I've been a volunteer board member with Housing Initiatives of Princeton, a transitional housing and emergency rental assistance program that's been trying to protect economic diversity in this community. And in that role, I have become so acutely aware of the many challenges that low-income families face and the various fees that they have to pay, nickel and diming the high cost of being poor, if you're familiar with that phrase, that make it incredibly difficult and sometimes impossible, pushing them out, to do what you and I want to do, like them, just call Princeton and continue to call Princeton home. This is a wonderful place to live, and low-income working families want to live here as well and take advantage of all of the great schools and other community benefits that we all enjoy. So therefore, I urge you to vote no on the proposed ordinance, certainly until any consultants and studies are done. I think we need to know the data, we need to know the facts about what are the challenges with regard to extending the township rules into the former borough section of Witherspoon-Jackson rather than doing the opposite and adding burdens to the folks in the township area. I think we should be removing burdens and increasing access to parking and employment opportunities that come with that for folks in the former borough section of Witherspoon-Jackson. And therefore, I offer myself as a volunteer. I'd be happy to work with you, with the council, with the consultants, and any other studies or advisory committees that you form to figure out a way to do whatever needs to be done with regards to addressing the disparities between the township and the borough in a way that does not force hardworking families out of our community and make this an even more exclusive enclave than it already is. Oh, and one other thing, I totally forgot. A neighbor of mine and I spent just 2 hours two people 2 hours yesterday walking up and down the streets and got 79 signatures on a petition opposing this ordinance. Many of them are not able to come here because kids, working, all that stuff that we've discussed, but I'd like to put this in the record.
Thank you so much.
My name is Paloma Moscardo, and I live in 77 Lee Avenue. And my voice is terrible. Been teaching too much. I'm sorry. I just wanted to support my neighbors. I do have a driveway. I have a Prius. I walk normally, but I think there's a lot of neighbors that don't have a driveway, and we are being kind of, I wouldn't say target, but it's being already a lot of burden on those families. I know a lot of people that only have one salary, they live by themselves. My neighbor Arden, she's retired, and this is being already pretty hard with all the property taxes. So I think that would be another burden. And I don't think there's really a problem in our street. We still have some parking on the street. So I would like to consider this after we have more data and try to think about those families that have economic problems. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'd like to call up Rebecca Ben, John Neal, and Kim Burry.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Ben. I live at 22 Lee Avenue.
Can you come closer to the
I'm
mic
sorry.
and talk loud?
Sorry, is that okay? I live at 22 Lee Avenue, and I'm here to register my opposition to the proposal. Instead of giving you anecdotes like everyone here has already eloquently done, I'm just going to make a comparison. And since we are making a judgment on this, I want to call your attention to the very famous Judgment of Solomon, in which two women were fighting over a baby. And Solomon decided that the woman who thought, okay, the baby that can be fairly cut in half and given to each person is obviously not the real mother. To a lot of people in this neighborhood, it feels like you're taking our parking away, is cutting the baby in half, and telling us it's fair. As Kristen said earlier, fair is not always equal, and I think you're making a very big mistake on this issue. Thank you.
My name is John Neal, and I'm now a year-and-a-half resident of Princeton on Van Deventer Street. And I would like you all to thank you all very much for considering a very difficult issue. As a relative outsider, I can say Princeton has a big parking problem, independent of what you've tried to take on in terms of getting everything coordinated. Two, misinformation abounds, and good luck with any change you try to make. The third and last point is, after having used the police department for overnight parking and been informed in calling up one night that things had suddenly changed, although very graciously, did I have an emergency, was somebody dying, I could still stay there. I then went to 3 different government people here who work in Princeton to try and find out why the change was, and I got 3 different answers. So I would say, be very careful in the change you make, and I think perhaps trying to pass an ordinance without the consultants and long-term is perhaps a good thing to do, would be to wait.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kim Berry. I live at 29 Lee Ave. As an aside, I'm a Corner House board member, so I want to thank you guys for recognition and your continued support. I'm here to voice my opposition against this proposal. I want to reiterate a lot of the things that have been said by my neighbors. I also wrote you guys an email. Mr. Quinn responded, thank you. You guys keep saying equity, and I kind of just want to bring up a point that equality is treating everyone the same, and equity is giving everyone the opportunity for success. And when I review a lot of the aspects about this parking proposal, I feel as though you're kind of increasing barriers for a large community by removing this parking. So I'm going to let some of my more articulate and eloquently spoken neighbors kind of continue the discussion, but I just wanted to state that I am opposed to this. I do welcome a collaboration. I welcome hearing what the consultants say. I would also just kind of want to speak to the survey, which I think is great, like elicit people's responses, that's great, but I really don't think it quite captures our concerns as it does address more downtown, and as it even says in this proposal, you're talking about a residential neighborhood, which looks like something different. So I say please don't make any hasty decisions, speak with the consultants, continue to elicit responses from the neighbors. I'm happy to collaborate and facilitate the change that makes everyone happy. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we've come to the end of the list of folks who signed up ahead of the meeting. Is there anybody else who'd still like to speak? Okay, I would ask that you come to the mic, and since you didn't sign up ahead of time after you speak, I just ask that you come to this front table, and there's a sign-up sheet here, and to just sign the sheet once you're done.
Thank you. Leighton Newland, 230 Birch Avenue, Princeton, New Jersey. Parking. Why? We are 4 years into consolidation. My question regarding the need for parking revenues is why is the revenue needed and how will it be allocated? And quite frankly, why has the tweaking of the various ordinances taken so long? With all the beautiful minds that help us navigate our municipal budget and look at revenue versus expenses, have they been asked to review ways in which former borough homeowners would pay no parking fees in the same way that former township homeowners pay no additional funds for parking? What I find interesting is that the company conducting the study came first to the merchants and the parking enforcement entity. Why not talk to taxpayers first? Why does it always seem like the best way to address an increase in costs is to directly charge the citizenry? In 2010, during the reevaluation of homes in our town, the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, the lowest per capita income and the neighborhood with the most modest valued homes, experienced an increases 2 and in some cases 3 times their value before 2010, while most upscale neighborhoods were devalued or remained virtually the same. If the revaluation had been fair and equitable, and the property values were spread evenly, it is very possible we would not be discussing a $120 assessment for parking throughout the municipality in the very neighborhoods that can least afford it. And should you decide to sell your property, you will lose the benefit of an added value. The Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, while adjacent to the Uptown Business District, is not part of the district and should not be negatively impacted because merchants and the town want to make it more vital. Instead of paying high-powered parking consultants from Boston to do a study on how to make it work, why not spend the same amount of dollars to look at the negative impact of greater density and overcrowding? Witherspoon-Jackson became a historic district last April. My real and honest question is what good will that do if the Heritage Trail that was discussed earlier by our esteemed mayor comes to pass, and in the coming years, people traveling the trail find it challenging to see a person of color on their historic tour. We now have the possibility of greater tax revenue needed for our public schools and the need for more affordable housing as mandated by the courts. We have bigger fish to fry in Princeton than coddling to both the merchants and the university. Where does it stop? When does it end? And how will we ever get to where we want to be if we stay stuck where we are now? We are traveling in warp speed to becoming Beverly Hills East. Forget our disenfranchised and lower socioeconomic population, Princeton will soon be unaffordable to middle-class Americans. A very good friend said to me regarding my appearing before council tonight, if you are going to voice your displeasure about the parking situation, it will be good if you had a suggestion to make it better. Here is my suggestion. Having already paid a high-powered Boston-based company to do a parking study focusing on the area from Library Place to Linden Lane and from Birch Avenue to University Place, if revenue is needed for the parking situation rather than impact all of those neighborhoods that abut the commercial district and are in close proximity to it, charge each and every dwelling in the town of Princeton $10 per year. Maybe the people on Great Road, Hodge Road, Mercer Street, Constitution Way, Northern Road, Battle Road, Cherry Valley Road, and other affluent areas don't need on-street parking, but why is it that here in Princeton, the least able are always asked to subsidize the most able? If there are 3,000 homeowners in Princeton, that would account for $30,000 in additional revenue. Why should many of the people who are barely able to hold on continue to bear the brunt and pay the highest cost of the municipality's financial forecasting challenges and inadequacies? One last issue. Why is it that entities 20 miles from our town are able to maintain a Princeton address? My questions are, how much revenue, if any, do we receive from that? Is it legal? And is there anything at all we as a municipality can do about it? Maybe so, maybe not, but the question has been begging for an answer for a long time. Rather than vote on this ordinance tonight, I implore this body to wait until all the studies and pertinent information comes forward. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lewis Hamilton. I'm on Murray Place. I just want to underline my support for our first speaker's 5 points, Catherine Ellington. I thought it was excellent. And also just like to point out to you that many of the speakers have said, and I include myself in this, that they bought their homes under one set of understandings, and that gave their homes a certain property value. If you change the parking situation in that street, that reduces my home value. You've caused me financial harm. And I expect to be compensated for that financial harm, right? And you have a room full of people who just said that to you. So what's your plan to compensate the citizens of Princeton when you cause millions of dollars in financial damage? Thank you.
Excuse me, can you just come back and sign the sheet so we get your name right for the minutes? Thank you.
Hi, Carol Carnegie, 147 Birch Avenue for the last 22 plus years. First of all, kudos to those of you who thought to call the police to get a overnight parking permit, because I never thought to do that. Many of my guests have gotten tickets out front of my house. So I don't know why I never thought of that. So I would propose that all families should have a guest permit, one guest permit. If you're having a relative stay over, whatever it is, somebody should be able to park near your home. I guess I have a question. First of all, why, it seems the hours in question are this 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. Is there a reason that we don't want cars on the streets down in the Witherspoon neighborhood between those hours? I'm kind of stumped as to, we park one car on the street and one on our driveway. Why do you want the cars off the street during those hours? It seems like this parking issue was to keep the cars off the street.
should we answer that as part of the discussion, or?
If you can finish your comments,
Okay.
and then we'll answer that.
Okay, okay. I was here a couple of years ago for one of our neighbors was putting an addition on his home. And at the time, one of the issues that came up from council was that he was pulling his cars in his driveway, and because his driveway wasn't deep, he was pulling one sort of off to the front of his home. And the council had an issue with that, him actually pulling the car in off the driveway in front of his house. And we appealed to council saying that we have to do that during snow, inclement weather. We have to pull our cars off the street, and they can't go in the lot. They're paving the lot. We have to put them in front of our homes on the grass. And council said, fine, he could do that. He could pull his car up in front of the house. So now we're put in this predicament of, you want us to get the cars off the street, and you're only permitted to have, if you have a driveway, you could have one permit. So if you have someone staying over your home, at your house, the driveways are small in that neighborhood. I don't know if you've taken a look at them, but some of them barely even fit one car. There's sort of this silent, understood communication in the neighborhood and courtesy that when you park your car in your driveway, I pull my car in just far enough so it doesn't obstruct my neighbor's window, and we park the one on the street. If we have to pull two cars in the driveway, I have to pull the car up so far that when they step out of their house onto their porch stoop, my car is right there. So if they're pulling out a garbage can or doing anything, they're walking right into my car. So, people try to be courteous to one another, and I try to stay away from their stoop and use the little front part of my driveway. But if I have to put two cars in, I'm blocking the sidewalk. So if we have to start pulling all the cars into the driveways that don't really accommodate our cars, we're parking on the sidewalks and blocking the sidewalks. So, there's some larger issues besides the fees and, some of these other things about the parking spaces in the John Witherspoon neighborhood, and that's not downtown. It is a residential neighborhood. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Well, okay, so the former borough and I should have, by the way, I did misspeak when I said downtown, I meant in-town neighborhoods. The in-town neighborhoods, including some in the township, have had a long-standing overnight parking prohibition. One reason is safety. The police can patrol at night and have a clear streets, and we've heard from the police that they would I'm just telling you, it's everywhere. So the overnight parking prohibition is, it started to keep, I believe, I think the origination might have been because of the university, but I'm not sure.
Yes.
But one of the reasons that I believe in the overnight parking prohibition, and I hear everyone in this room how hard it is to pay for parking, but I believe that it's the right thing to do, that the people who own cars should pay for parking.
We can't have people
parking. There is no free parking for permanent parking spots for residents in Princeton. Most people, they pay through their tax. They pay for a property, and the property is priced higher if it has a driveway, and that's because those people are paying. I believe in social equity and in doing for low income, providing programs, but free parking, I think it's not something that I automatically think that's something the municipality should be providing. I'm not saying I don't hear your problems, and we are providing for income challenged people. There are some programs here, but
I'm sorry, I have to ask, I know there's a lot of... Well,
I'm sorry if I don't mean to talk down to you, but no, there's no place in Princeton that provides free parking, and this neighborhood is very dense. I believe it's the most dense. There are also some streets on Pine Street and in that area that are also very dense that are having the same types of problems. But the last thing I want to say about the parking study is we got it as a grant, and Deanna Stockton applied for it very creatively because the state provided the parking study for economic development. So that's why we've been focusing on the merchants. We would love to, and I do now that I've heard everyone, I think, yes, it's a good idea. We probably should wait. And I'm going to suggest that we wait to postpone this ordinance adoption until we hear that study, more about from that study. But I just want you to know that the reason that parking study was so emphasizing the merchants is because that's what the grant insisted upon, and we kind of expanded it to residential areas. It was pushing the envelope about what that money was for. So.
okay. Here, Stephanie, come on up.
Hi, Stephanie Charney, Loudon Ray Street. I agree completely with my eloquent neighbors. So I'm not going to repeat myself or repeat what people have said, but I just wanted to bring up a few slightly different points. So, Mr. Carmillo, you mentioned about the environmentally friendly version of this ordinance. I think that is really, I don't perceive this ordinance as being environmentally friendly to anyone. Let's get some bike lanes on our streets, especially if we're going to clear the streets now of parking. I don't see any bike lanes, so if you can't have a car, can we get safely to another location? No, we cannot. If you need more money in the town, how about having people pay for the trash they make instead of paying for the one car you may have? Let's get more public transportation on our streets. Let's mandate commercial properties like Avalon Bay to have a commercial space for us to buy our groceries if you don't want us to have enough cars for the people that can drive in our houses. And then lastly, safety. If people are going to have to pay for their parking spot, they're going to pull their cars into their very small driveway, and the cars will stick out into the street and into the sidewalk, and I believe that's even more unsafe than having cars on the street. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie, can you just come back and sign? Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Al Carnavelli, 178 Birch Avenue. I don't think anybody can top what Leighton just said and the First Lady, what she had to say. But I was doing some quick math. And I just sat here tonight because, as I've sat through many other boards, it seems like every once in a while, money just flies out of this room. You gave those people $50,000. $50,000. Oh, we'll just pass on it. They're already expected to pay for it. Now, if these numbers are right here, 370 permits at $120 is $44,000 you're going to collect from these people in this room. So, and I've watched you pass another ordinance in the past where you've, and then we got the 7.5 acreage that we're going to pick up on the promise that someone will go and fix it. On the promise. Mr. Miller last year eloquently stated we have to take care of the open space we already had, but yet we paid $4 million for more open space that we don't need, if I'm correct, by the ordinance of this community of 25%. And what happens this year? We have problems with the trees. We have problems with our other open spaces that we just keep pouring money out there. Now, unless there's a money tree out there someplace, I don't get it. So you've heard everything here tonight, but what never happens here is I would like us, you, to give us a straw vote right now if you'll defeat this bill right now tonight and table it. I'd like to see how everybody wants to vote. other than that, there's nothing to argue about, because as my attending these things, it's a done deal pretty much. So let's see a straw vote, if you would.
Well, I want to see if there's anybody else who still wants to speak.
My name is Lawrence Parker, homeowner at 27 Lee Avenue, lifelong resident of Princeton, 63 years. A couple of things. One of the things that comes to mind, that people who look like me had no other choice of where to live in Princeton. So you had to live in that neighborhood, you had to live on smaller lots, you had to live where there was no parking. And you were still being penalized today because of that Jim Crow era back in the time before I was born. And it's a shame that you will still try to support that. One of the other things that comes to mind, I was one of the original persons that was part of the committee to talk to the township about getting parking permits. And back then, like over this 20 years ago maybe, it was said then by a police officer that was on the committee, well, you know they're going to have abandoned cars in that neighborhood. And that was one of the reasons they didn't want to have cars overnight. I mean, and it's perpetuating today. You're saying that it's more dangerous if there's cars on our streets. And I just don't understand
But that's everywhere in the borough, everywhere in the borough.
I live on Lee Avenue. Lee Avenue was a township, always, except for the far end, was a township. One of the reasons we had to move our cars every night. We had to move our cars off of Lee Avenue. You had a 2-hour parking limit, where you would be ticketed for having your car parked in front of your house for 2 hours. The police used to come put a chalk line next to your tire, and if you didn't move it, you had a ticket. So again, we fought that. We fought it because it was unfair for us residents of Lee Avenue. The hospital people were coming and parking on our streets, taking up our spots. But now to have a charge, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Again, that we've been mistreated all these years, and we still continue being mistreated. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Cheryl Whitney. I live at 69 Lee Avenue. Most of the points I wanted to bring up tonight have already been brought up, but there is one logistical thing that I'm wondering if they've thought about, and that is that for those of us who really don't want to pay that extra money, we're going to be looking at the parking area next to Community Park. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's already getting more and more crowded from when I moved there in 1996, besides which you've allocated parking spaces to the school teachers, which I think is fair during the day, but there's nothing that says that we can park there on that side at night. So it's like, I understand why they're doing the alternate side of the park, and when there's a blizzard and I call the police, they say, oh no, you can park anywhere, and that's nice, but I'm tired of favors because my taxes are really quite high. So the other thing I want to speak to is from my role as an educator. In education, you don't paint everybody with the same brush. You have things that are called developmentally appropriate. It is not appropriate for you to paint the entire parking ordinance for the town as though every neighborhood was uniform. So you've unified Princeton, but the neighborhoods are not uniform. So you really need to do more work, I feel, in order for your harmonization to really work. Thank you very much.
Dozier Hammond, 87 Lee Avenue. I just want to reiterate that I agree that we should not have this happen to my neighborhood. I do think that for the majority of the residents who are there, especially the residents who have been there a long time, this would be too much of a burden for them. We are in a unique neighborhood. It's also a diverse neighborhood in the sense of distance from downtown. Birch and Lee are not right next to downtown. And I thought it was interesting in the parking survey that the only neighborhood that was really outside of downtown that was included in the parking survey was our neighborhood. Now, if you're really trying to find out what the problems are there, what the needs are of the neighborhood, then that's important and that should be good. But if you look at it, I mean, they might extend a little bit beyond downtown in some of the areas, and of course east along Nassau, because that's a commercial area now. But the only area that goes way up is all the way up to Birch Avenue. And, you know, maybe that's legitimate if you're really trying to help out the neighborhood and go forward. I just want to mention that the whole issue of permits, and this gets down to a little bit level of detail, but after you sell your house, then you can only get one permit if you have no driveway. And again, as a lot of people have said already, our driveways in many cases are extremely short, can barely fit one car. But to penalize people who, you know, might have a house that has no driveway, to only give them one permit, even that would be discriminatory. But I hope in general that you reject this decision, go back to the drawing board and look at it, because again, I think our neighborhood is one that has, as been mentioned before, borne the brunt of the tax increases in town. Again, I know that you had no direct control over that. I still think we could have found some creative ways to deal with that, but our taxes have gone up 2 and 3 times. Some of us can afford it, many of us cannot. And for the people who cannot, an extra $120, an extra $240 would be a lot of money. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? You have to come to the microphone or we can't hear you.
I did already speak, but I really need to address this safety issue between parking between 2 and 6 a.m. We have no problem for speeders driving down our street. People drive 50 miles an hour down our street. Why is there a safety issue? Well, there is a safety issue. There's a traffic issue. But there is no issue with an ambulance coming down the street. I've seen it happen, and there's no problem. Cities manage emergency services quite well with cars parked on the street. So if you're going to restrict 2 to 6 a.m., you're going to have to come up with a better reason, because that's really not a good reason anymore. It might have worked in the 1950s, but it doesn't work anymore. You have to think about what's happening now. You can't hang on to these old laws that don't make sense anymore. Thank you for listening to me the second time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'd like to close the public hearing unless there's anybody else who didn't get a chance to speak. All right, and I do, before we bring it back to council, I wanted to thank everybody for their thoughtful comments, and if we do decide to ask the consultants to review this, I hope that we can share a tape of the meeting with them so they can hear from all of you directly, because I thought many of the comments were really constructive and helpful. But I would like to bring it back to council, and yeah, Mr. Liverman?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for speaking and being honest. We need to hear that sometimes. It's extremely important. When this issue came up, I know Mr. Leighton Nolan mentioned it, why they take 2 or 3 years, because we knew it was going to be an issue. This is a very difficult decision to try to put through. I agree with Ms. Crumiller tonight that we are not able to put this together for any kind of vote. And I do think that it was mentioned about fair and equitable, being fairly and treating people equally. And there is something to that. The John Witherspoon neighborhood is an extremely different kind of neighborhood. And maybe there is something that we have to make allowances for, especially when it comes to parking. There's a, you know, it was mentioned in regard to the financial compensation for any lost income you receive on the selling of your home. I never thought of it that way until it was mentioned that there's a different way of trying to look at things. But I just want you to know that when you come and you speak before us, no matter what some people may have said, we all listen. We have different opinions, but we all listen, and we hear you loud and clear. When you email us, we read your emails. We may not respond. So I welcome you to be proactive like you are, and you know, you elect us to do this job. You put us up here, and you can take us away. And we usually listen. I mean, some of you have come to our meetings many times, and we usually listen. We try to make it work. We're not here to as I mentioned earlier, put our foot on your neck or to hold you down. We understand taxes are high. So we're trying to work with you. So please don't think that we're the bad guys. We're really trying to work with you. Thank you.
I want to second what Lance said, which is that I think we're clearly not ready to move tonight, and we need to hear from the parking study, even though I think we should acknowledge that the parking study may not resolve everything. And from my perspective, I think something that I always think of when it comes to these parking issues is that, you know, people order their lives based on those kind of things, you know, where they can park and where they can live and how their family can live there. And sometimes we really want to harmonize everything, and the answer may not be to harmonize, that people have organized their life. Sorry to say it the same way again, I'm trying to, you know, but people sort of establish their lives based on the rules as they know them, in that it's very hard to change them. And so to me, it will not be a failure if we don't harmonize and we don't change the rules, because that's respecting the way people have chosen to order their lives. So this is really tough, and I think I'm glad we have a parking study coming in and that they've heard so much, but I myself, we all have the battle scars of all the parking discussions. I don't know that we can count on there being a silver bullet, and so the answer may be to recognize just how critical this is to how families function, and that change, that perhaps our first instinct should be, and our overriding instinct should be, do no harm. So.
Mr. Miller?
I too would like to thank you all for coming out tonight and being pretty forthright about what you're thinking about the parking issues. I want to point out this is not the first iteration at an attempt to try and define parking in what is easily the most dense neighborhood in the town. And we've tried over the years. That's why it's taken, as my friend Leighton Newland pointed out, several years for us to come up with something to put in front of you. And it's clear that perhaps we ought to go back and take another look at it. I'd like to try and answer one of the easier questions that was asked tonight, and that too was asked by my friend Leighton, and that is, what do we do about the towns or parts of towns nearby that have Princeton addresses and realtors that advertise underneath the property that they show in one of our papers, local papers, Princeton post office address. Historically, some parts of adjacent communities have and continue to have Princeton post office addresses. Nothing we can do about that. That's the U.S. Postal Service. Also, any of us can go into the Princeton post office and rent a postal box and instantly have a Princeton address. Nothing can stop you from doing that. You can locate your business or yourself someplace else and still have a Princeton post office address. Years ago, when there was something called the RCA Laboratories on the other side of Route 1 in West Windsor, Princeton Junction, that institution had a Princeton post office address. When one of the businesses that was spun off from that laboratory became quite successful and located out in East Windsor, that too had a Princeton address. The address was Box 800, Princeton, New Jersey. You can't stop businesses from doing that. There is nothing that we can do. We can't tax them. We can't stop people from using the name Princeton, neither can the university, unless it's another educational institution. I would guess that might be easier, but we can't stop business from saying they're Princeton whatever, and going into the post office, renting a post office box, and having a Princeton address, even if they're located 30, 40, 50 miles away. So I took the easy question late, and I hope it provides you with an answer.
Yeah, I want to say too, I think I probably am like the hardline parking person on the council, and, you know, bring it on, because I understand, I mean, I'm listening, but one thing that I didn't agree on is that we should take away the number of the parking spaces. So my position right now is that I believe that we should expand the permit program so that the current township people who aren't used to pay with the caveat that their income qualified people can get a break. So I just wanted to put that out there because I have a feeling everyone on the council will agree that we shouldn't take away the spaces, but I'm not going to speak too far in advance. But now, I mean, I also think that we should take advantage and wait for the parking study to happen, because it just seems like an easy thing to do that will perhaps give us more confidence in whatever decision we make.
Excuse me. I didn't plan on speaking, but can I speak? First of all, I live in the neighborhood that we're talking about for over 40 years, 50 years, not to tell my age, and watching all of this stuff that other people are making decisions for who do not live in the town. There needs to be more of a study of the people who live in these areas that you're talking about, rather than you making a decision. You can't make a decision for me. There are going to be a lot of problems this summer. You got a lot of new people in my neighborhood, Lee Avenue, at the end, and the visitor. You're going to have a lot of visitors. We had visitors day before yesterday, all day. My neighbors do not have a driveway, so they can't park. So you need to have something. The people who do not have driveways, you need to contact these people, let them speak about it. I mean, I let them use my driveway if they have to. But the thing about it is this study is not good. And you need to take a big look at it. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Deanna, I'm just wondering, we heard some things tonight about the consulting firm. Could you repeat exactly what the goals are of the parking study? And could you address this issue of how long were the consultants in town? Who did they meet with? In what order did they meet?
Sure. The parking study is actually funded through a federal grant for transportation and economic development. And after a nationwide search for federal guidelines, we hired Nelson Nygaard from Boston, Massachusetts. And the main goal and focus of the study is to look at how to maintain and boost the economic vitality of our downtown. But as we've heard, the downtown businesses, part of their issues is finding appropriate parking for their employees. That's a big issue. And what we found is that their employee parking starts spreading further and further from downtown into the tree streets, into the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, where you don't have necessarily regulations on all of the roadways. So when we put together the study area, we wanted to also include those neighborhoods to see if there are different innovative strategies that could be implemented to protect the neighborhoods, to protect the residents, but still also look at how do you create a condition in our downtown, especially with the changing face of retail, to keep it a vital, active community-based downtown. So that's how the grant application was set up. The consultant came in for 2 days, and the way they typically schedule their time is they like to take about a day and a half of stakeholder meetings. And so we established that different stakeholders for this meeting would be, let's see, we had restaurant and bar owners, we had services like your offices and your regular services type businesses. They met with your standard retail people. They did meet with neighborhood representatives from the Tree Streets and from Witherspoon Jackson. They met with, they also met with police, with the clerk, and with anybody that was associated with establishing parking rules, regulations, that type of thing.
But I guess my point is, within the same, they met with an open parking meeting the same day that they met with anybody else. They were basically here a day and a half.
Right.
So if anybody got in, it was all within 36 hours. Everyone met. Okay.
Yes.
And this, we thought we were doing a good thing by including this neighborhood so that when we look, I mean, quite honestly, one of the things that's been under consideration is raising parking rates in downtown. And we want to make sure that as we consider that, that will have a ripple effect throughout the neighboring communities. And we wanted to make sure that we capture what that ripple effect will be. So that's why certain neighborhoods are in the parking study. So that's, I hear that people are ready to abandon the ordinance, but can you talk a little bit about, Deanna, whether you think the parking study will come back? I mean, do you anticipate that they would lift a permit on the overnight? Like, if we have a permit system, are they likely to say, oh, don't charge for it? I mean, I guess Bernie started his remarks this evening talking about that. There's no such thing as free parking. And one of the things that we tried to do in the borough on any service, not just parking, but on everything, whether it's building permits or, you can think of a zillion things. What we charge for the pool, we try to set a price that covers the cost of our providing that service, so that users of services are generally absorb the cost of those services. That's the way we always tried to price things. And so one of the things in the former borough, in the Witherspoon Jackson neighborhood, but on McLean, Green, Quarry, there is a permit fee, there always has been, and it's been the $30 a quarter, which we felt sort of covered the administrative costs of running that program. My sense is it's not likely that the consultant is going to come back and say, oh, you can eliminate that.
I can't speak directly for them, but I think what they will provide us with potential ideas of how to share the cost or trade-offs that could be considered. Bernie had mentioned Donald Shoup.
Right.
You know, I've heard some seminars on his theories, and, you know, there's an idea, well, maybe you try to have like a daytime business permit for those streets, and maybe the cost of whoever wants to buy that permit offsets the residents' permits. So, I mean, I think what they can provide probably are different ideas to think about, and just to reframe the whole discussion from where it's been over the last, 40, 50
Right.
years.
So today I had lunch at the Senior Resource Center. They were celebrating their Grand Pals program, and I sat down at a table with some mostly people I didn't know, and the first thing someone said to me was, I hear John Street's getting free parking. I want it too. She lives on Humbert. And so we heard a lot about what we want to happen on Lee and Birch, which is not to have a parking permit system. But the fact is, there are a lot of people in our community that are already on a permit system and they're paying. And so what we didn't hear tonight was any way they also don't have driveways or have a driveway or there's limited parking. And so we really didn't hear any way what we're going to do about those people. Do we lift the permits altogether? I mean,
I think that was
because that was a rhetorical
that was
question.
rhetorical. So I just want to. I'm sorry. It's 10:15 and we still have stuff on our agenda, and I think we really have heard you. And what I'm hearing from council.
But wait,
is that
I want to say I think there are elements of this. You know, people on Burt, on Quarry, on Green, on McLean, their neighbors, all have to get a permit from the clerk. It is not transferable. It's registered to a specific car. There are a lot of things in here that I think even if we didn't want to change the number of permits, or even if, you know, you wouldn't have the stomach for the fee, there are things in here that are worth following up on.
Thanks. I would
Can I just
very
30
quickly.
seconds, since I didn't know about the study, and I think I have something to share. 30 seconds tops.
But please email us. I feel like this is not going to be the end of the discussion tonight. I
Thank
can
you.
almost
Thank
guarantee
you.
you that.
Sir-
No, we've closed the public hearing. I'm
This
sorry.
report's going to come back biased, because it's already biased. It's
Okay.
biased to the businessmen here who wanted to come all the way down Witherspoon. And who most gets the best out of that? The community here or the developers? Listen, I sat through the Witherspoon-Jackson meetings, all but told, I'm going to have my say for 5 minutes, I'd say. And that's, not every one of you people on this board even understands all the rules of that type of association. You don't get it. The builders and the developers get a lot of more benefit out of us being a historic district than we get. And there was no one even wanted to ask the question of the gentleman that was in charge of our historic district. And he knew it. He knew it, the guy who heads our committee. And he was asked at the last minute. So you need to not only listen to this, but you have to pull these people and have a meeting with all these people so you get some input from the community, because this is coming back biased, just like the Witherspoon-Jackson report came back biased.
Sir,
I
thank
gotta
you.
ask-
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much. But
Thank you.
thank you. Okay. I do ask that we have heard you, and I do appreciate everybody coming out tonight, but we do have to come back and have the discussion at council, and it's 10:20, and we also have other public hearings that we're obligated to have tonight. So I just want to make sure we can hear from the council members and then come to some resolution. So, Mr. Quinn?
I'll try to be succinct. When we had a workshop and the ordinance was introduced, I expressed concern about dual income households and multi-generational households. And I think that those concerns have been echoed in this community, and not just in the Witherspoon-Jackson neighborhood, but in the Tree Streets, in Humbert and Greenview, and in my own neighborhood, Jugtown, where there are people who have to pay for parking on the street. I think this is I support the work that my colleagues on the parking committee did, but I think that this is a time for us to look at what's coming. And what's coming, we know, are more units for affordable housing, and that's going to change the parking landscape in a way that we should be out in front of rather than harmonizing old ordinances, in my opinion. So I would support putting this off and looking at areas of density, areas where the houses predated the widespread use of the automobile, such as my street, and try to come up with something that works. And to the point of certain neighborhoods being included and excluded, I frankly was upset that my neighborhood, Jugtown, was not included, because we are becoming a part of downtown. because people from the university are parking on our streets during the day, it's not a problem, and because people can't park at night and they look out at an empty street and wonder why they can't have another car without paying for a permit. So I think the time is ripe for rethinking the whole thing. Apologies to my colleagues on the parking committee. I would support tabling this, or I would vote no.
Okay, I think I've heard from council. I don't think there's much appetite for passing this, but I would just put it out there. Does anybody want to make a motion? If there's no motion, then it will die. So, okay, there's no motion, so then I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. And this conversation will be continued. I think it was clear tonight that the neighbors obviously have a lot to say and a lot of positive input that can be put into getting a solution that's going to work for everybody. So we hope we can continue to work with all of you, hear what our consultants have to say, looking at other communities as well who face similar issues. So thank you for coming out tonight and for sharing your thoughts with us. Okay. Okay, and then I would ask if we have more meetings, so if you can take your conversation out into the hallway. Thank you. Okay, I just want to talk to my colleagues now about the rest of the agenda. So we have 2 public hearings left. We have several ordinance introductions, resolutions, and consent agenda. Do we want to hold off our work sessions until the May meeting, or do we want to go back and try to do them now? Okay, so Bernie is asking that we do the cold storage.
Well, the mailbox one should, if everyone read the
All right.
memo, I think everybody probably just agrees with that.
Okay, so let's just go back then, and we'll get through as much of this as we can.
Or
So
why
I
don't,
propose
why
that-
don't we just bring the mailbox back as it doesn't need to be a work session, does it? Just bring it back as an.
Oh,
It's not
are there
gonna
any
s-
questions or any?
It's not going to snow again, so.
Okay. Okay.
Should we just, everyone
Bring it
say,
back
yeah,
as
that's a
an
good
ordinance.
policy?
Does everybody agree with that policy? Okay, so you can bring the policy back as a resolution or however you need us to approve it. And then set the timer for Mr. Huff, please.
My one friend.
Channel Heather in your speaking speed.
Cold storage. You have a spreadsheet we've put together that we've talked about at Public Works numerous times. Really need some direction as far as where we're going. The recommendation from the Public Works Committee is that we do the Butler-style building, which has the higher price tag, the longer life. As your professional, that's what I would recommend that you would do. But I do understand that I also am competing with other projects, and should you tell me to do otherwise, I will tell you that whatever you tell me to do, I will start tomorrow. Actually, I've already started, but we will get moving. One of the things we will do is move forward with the New Jersey EIT. We have spoken briefly with them for some funding options. And the other thing that we have discussed is Mark and I have talked several times regarding the fact for the rest of the capital of this. And we could make this work by pushing the rest of the capital and doing a bond ordinance for that in 2018. We could make our schedule work and still bid the project. I've also talked to Sandy Webb, and as she said, as long as I have done the bond ordinance prior to awarding a contract, she would be able to work with us. So there are some options that we could do from a funding standpoint, but clearly what I'm looking for is what direction do we want to go in. And as I said, the Public Works Committee, their consensus at our last meeting continued to be along the lines of doing the Butler-style building with the portion of it being heated to provide space for the SOC equipment that needs warmer temperatures.
That's the third column here.
That is the final column, yes.
Oh, the final column,
The furthest to the right, yes.
because it seems like the third column over, you get 50-plus years, and it's only a little bit more than...
It's a 100 by 150 as opposed to 100 by 300.
Oh, I see. Okay. Are there any...
Recommendation from the Public Works Committee with council representation from Snowball, Windmill South, was for exactly that. The 100 by 300 long life building, just as indicated that this is house 7.
Can I ask
Yeah,
a question?
Butler?
Did you do any calculations on the maintenance of the various alternatives? Like, you said you want to heat the Butler style, which frankly, it's quite nice of you to name that after me, but did you...
I'll try anything for a vote.
Yeah. Anything? Really? I got a little leaf and brush I could use picked up. Is there... Did you do any maintenance costs? Did I see that?
We do have a consultant, Chambers Architecture, that has been working with us, and yes, we have spoken to him. And with regard to the pole barn, within usually about a 10 to 12 year cycle, we'll be out there painting it, redoing certain portions of it, dealing with the wood that's out there that's being built. That's the industry standard. Joe, with any of these things, we could build any of these, and some of them, they could last 10 years, they could last 30 years. The better building could last 60 or 70 years. You see it when you look around. The industry standard is these numbers. But certainly with proper maintenance over time, I would expect that this Butler building will be up there for a good 60, 70 years, probably. Look at the Quonset hut we have. We built that thing.
Right.
That thing,
But I'm talking, but also, like, what would you expect if you're heating this? What would we be looking at in terms of that kind of cost, the maintenance?
Like, would the heating be more with the Butler than with the other?
We expect, based on talking with Chambers, that both buildings would be insulated. He expects that with the style of construction of the Butler, we would have a better energy savings with the Butler building than with the pole barn, and a lower heating cost.
So I just will make a motion to make it easier that we do the Butler building.
It's
The
a
big
work
Butler.
session.
The big Butler building. I know. Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I'm just trying to move the conversation along.
All right. Well,
Who does?
It
was
sounds
from-
like the Public Works Committee folks, well, I don't know, I haven't heard from Tim, but were you in support of this? All right, so...
Yes, I was, Mayor.
And then Joe and Heather, did you essentially agree with that?
Right.
Okay, all
Joe
right.
will agree if we call it the Butler Building.
All right.
Conversations about this. Could we get a picture? There weren't pictures in here.
Good idea.
That's a great
Could we get a color picture of what these various construction types might be?
Absolutely.
And also,
Maybe a
it'd
little
be...
car, and maybe you could build a model to some scale.
I want to build this thing.
Well, I think there are on Washington Road, you can see the pole barns, right? Because the university has those white pole barns, yeah.
Those are true cold storage. There's little to no insulation in them. They store chairs, for example, and tables at the user reunion. I mean, that's what's in a lot of them.
Did you look at those by any chance, or?
I have previously.
And
Yeah, no floor. They're built on stone. I mean, they are primitive in some cases.
And Bob, it might be helpful also to give the number of vehicles that each would store. So I know that we looked at maximizing the storage of the leaf equipment in the summer and, and the snow equipment also in the summer. But if you could give us a sense of what will fit in the 100 by 300 as opposed to the 100 by 150. I think that would help our colleagues visualize a little bit what we're talking about.
Get through the clerk's office, and Mark will get you some information,
And-
pictures and some of that stuff. We have all that.
I would suggest that any of my colleagues who haven't taken the tour of our public works facilities, which are spread out all over the municipality, that it's certainly an eye-opener. And certainly with 2 new people coming on next year, I think it should be part of their, I'm going to suggest to our new council members that they do that sooner than later. Thank you.
Good suggestion. Okay, thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Good job.
We should have you on
Oh, I
every
have
night
more-
at
I have
10:15.
more items. I'm just staying right here with you.
Okay. Ordinance public hearings 2017-15, an ordinance of the municipality of Princeton authorizing the vacation of a 10-foot wide access easement across block 1403, lot 18 on the Princeton tax maps, which is 221 Herrontown Road.
I'll move that.
Well, we got to open the public hearing.
Oh, can't we do it after we move it? Or well,
All right.
okay.
We'll open the public hearing and close the public hearing unless Phil wants to speak. Nope, okay.
I'll move it.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Ms. Krummeller, seconded by Mr. Quinn. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ordinance passes unanimously. Next is ordinance 2017-17, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton concerning litter and littering and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. I'd like to open the public hearing for this ordinance. And seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing.
I'll move it.
It's moved by Ms. Krummeller, seconded by Mr. Miller. Is there any questions or discussions?
Could I make just one quick comment? This is an example of where we have, looking at this ordinance, we realized that it was not consistent with practice, so that theoretically, every downtown merchant should be responsible for the trash can, removing the waste in the trash can that's near their, in front of their place of business, but we realized that is not the practice, and so we changed the ordinance to meet what we're currently doing, but also because it reduces the number of garbage trucks in town. We think it's overall better for the community, and there you have it.
I just had a question. I mean, was this, I assume this was welcomed by the merchants and,
Well, since we've discussed it at 10:30 both times that we've talked about it, I'm not even sure they're aware. And I'm not even sure they're aware that they have that responsibility.
Yeah, I know.
Somehow, just over time, it's,
no, it just seems like
I'm sure Phil will write a little feature on it.
we hear concerns that, maybe are we doing enough?
I know,
And
I
this- And this seems like this is important to, I mean, Mayor, maybe just, I don't know, you probably are in regular contact with them. It would be, I think this would be a good thing to.
Guess what? You don't have to empty your garbage anymore.
All right. Oh, yeah, thank you. Dolores, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Crum-Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. Next, we come to ordinance introductions. The first is 2017-19, an ordinance amending Chapter 34 of the Code of the, something's wrong here. Does anybody know if this is I think it's usually both, right? Which one? This is
The
the
sewer
sewer
connection
connection
fees?
fees?
Yeah, which, are you amending township code or borough code?
Well, since we were joint, maybe it's the same.
I think it's both.
It's both.
This has already been consolidated?
Okay, so should I say the code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968?
No, because actually this is still codified in the borough code. So even though the provisions have been consolidated, we don't have a standalone Princeton code yet. So, and when I'm looking now at the body of the ordinance, and the body of the ordinance makes it clear it's Article 4 in Chapter 34 of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, that's being, right. So I think what we want to say at the top, the title of the ordinance should be an ordinance amending Chapter 34 of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974.
Right, concerning sewer connection fees.
Concerning sewer connection fees.
Okay. Is there a motion to introduce?
So,
Moved by Ms. Kremiller, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Quinn. Any questions or comments? Dolores, can you please read the roll?
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crummiller?
yes.
Ms. Butler? Yes. Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance is introduced. The public hearing will be on May 22nd, 2017. Next is 2017-20. An ordinance by the municipality of Princeton accepting Title 39 jurisdiction over the Griggs Corner parking yard and amending Chapter 19, Article 11, I guess, parking of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. Is there a motion to introduce?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Quinn. Is there a second?
Well, we didn't hear the resolution yet.
Well, why don't we get it on the
Okay.
table, then we'll hear.
Okay.
So is there a second?
Okay, second.
Seconded by Ms. Krummeller. And
Just quick.
Trishka, can you give us the brief on this?
This ordinance would give Princeton the ability or the authority to enforce parking regulations in the Griggs Corner parking lot, and then it establishes what those regulations are. I think this has been, we've already had it before you a few months ago in work session. In the broad outlines, basically, of the agreement, as laid out in the ordinance, the parking lot owner would continue to set rates and durations on the meters. They'll be responsible for making sure that there's signage posted very prominently as to what the rates are, what the durations are, what forms of payment are accepted. We, Princeton, the police department, will then enforce the same way that it enforces parking regulations in any other parking yard in Princeton, and then retain any fines that are collected. So the parking lot owner keeps the meter revenue, but Princeton, through enforcement, would retain any fines for violating the parking regulations in that lot. There's no requirement that there be a grace period on the meters. The operator or owner of the lot does retain the ability to close the lot for private events. I mean, they really control how long people can park there, when they can park there, how much they have to pay, what they can use to pay. Princeton is just responsible for enforcement. Like enforcement anywhere else in town, it's subject to availability of resources. So there's no commitment that you enforce on any particular schedule, just as you're not obligated to enforce anywhere else in town on any particular schedule. So you would be, from an enforcement perspective, this is like any other municipal parking lot. Those are the broad outlines. The other thing that's laid out in the ordinance, and this is set by statute, so it's not discretionary, either side can rescind. So if the operator of the parking lot decides 2 months from now that it doesn't want Princeton doing the enforcement anymore, it just sends in a letter, it doesn't go into effect until January 1 of the following year, but you can rescind at any time. Similarly, if the council decides in 2 months, doesn't want to do the enforcement anymore, you can adopt an ordinance rescinding this ordinance, but again, it wouldn't go into effect until January 1. So either one can cancel at any time. It becomes effective the following January 1st. So it's a discretionary call. There's no obligation on your part to do this, but the ordinance does lay out the regulations that would apply in that lot were you to be taking on the enforcement authority.
I mean, I just said move
Okay.
Any other questions? I think I hit everything.
So I just want to clarify, the one last issue remaining was that they wanted us to enforce on their schedule, and we said no, and they went along with that.
Correct. They wanted the ordinance to include a specific schedule, so they wanted that schedule codified, and that's beyond the municipality's authority to do.
But clearly, it's in our best interest to enforce.
Well, and that's what I
as
told them.
often, right.
Yeah, when I had this discussion with their attorney, I said, since we're retaining the fines, we really do have a pretty good incentive to be out there enforcing.
Okay. So are there any further comments or questions?
I'd just like to say that I'm very much opposed to us being responsible for enforcement in the lot under the conditions that are laid out, particularly the not more than 1 minute grace period before the meters would display an overtime signal. This has been a problem in this lot. Many people have complained to me about the fact that it is inconsistent with other meters throughout the town, where there's a 10-minute grace on the meters, and claim that they've got there a couple of minutes after the time on their watch, only to find the ticket. So I think that there is a built-in inconsistency here that is going to lead to cars being ticketed, and ticketed only because the owner of the lot doesn't want to provide more than the 1 minute grace period, or to make the grace period consistent with the rest of the meters throughout the town. Even the meters at the train station, the 15-minute meters at the train station, provide a 10-minute grace period. Meters that are set there so you can go in to Wawa and grab a cup of coffee provide a 10-minute grace period. And I think that we're not doing anything that would be helpful to parkers in town by having them drive in there, park, and then get a ticket, because the meters here are different from meters elsewhere throughout the town. And also, I find the way the third bullet there is written, if necessary, demonstrating that the meter was functioning correctly. Somebody ought to be responsible for demonstrating that the meter was not functioning correctly. I'm not going to make the assumption if I get a ticket that the meter was functioning correctly, or have...
That's not how it currently works. And this is with any meter in town. If someone comes in and challenges a ticket and says the meter was running down too quickly, or it was broken, or whatever, there's actually diagnostic equipment that Princeton has. The Public Works Department goes out, tests the meter, prints out a report that it gives to the prosecutor.
Mm-hmm.
So it was absolutely critical that the same thing apply here. Now, their meters aren't compatible with our diagnostic equipment, so that's why we have this provision in here that if there's a challenge, we can't go out and test the meters because our equipment won't work on their meters. So they're going to have to give us the equivalent of what we would otherwise obtain from Public Works.
Fine.
And if that means that they have to send someone to testify in court, then they have to send someone to testify in court.
I'll accept that, but as far as I'm concerned, there ought to be a good, large sign at the entrance to the lot saying this is a private parking lot and administered by PSI or whoever it is that's administering the parking in the lot, and this is not a municipal lot.
I thought that was part of the agreement, that there was going to be a sign that said there was no grace period and that it was going to be a parking lot, right?
Well, yeah, there has to be signage about pretty much everything about the meters, including the lack of a grace period. There's nothing in the ordinance that says they have to have a sign that identifies it as a private lot, because that's not really what this ordinance is about. The ordinance is about establishing what the limitation, the parking regulations are, so that when we write a ticket, there's an ordinance number that you can put on the ticket. But there is supposed to be signage about the 1 minute grace period.
Ms. Butler, do you have a...
Well, I was just going to say, Bernie, I hear your concern about the grace period, but frankly, I didn't know there was a grace period on most meters until fairly recently anyway. I don't know that people really have the expectation that there's a grace period. In fact, I'm pretty sure that my car is bugged so that the minute the meter runs down, there's an alert and I get a ticket. So, I wish it was more, but this lot generates about, I don't know, I forget the exact number, but when we looked at it, it's 25, 30, 35, it's a decent amount $1,000 in ticket revenue. And so I'm sorry, but that's it. I think we just have to hold our nose and go along with it.
Okay. Are we ready to vote? Can you please call the roll?
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? No. Ms. Crum Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Okay, the ordinance has been introduced and the public hearing will be on May 22nd, 2017. Next is 2017-21, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating and establishing parking fees for the use of parking spaces at the Spring Street Municipal Parking Garage for charging of electric vehicles and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. Is there a motion to introduce?
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Mr. Miller, was that you? No, Mr. Quinn. And seconded by
Me.
Ms. Cromwell. Any discussion on this?
We worked out the fees and they're really good, reasonable, and like most other fees.
But did you ask everyone in Princeton who drives an electric vehicle whether they approve of this?
No.
Did you get that
Okay, Madam
input?
Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crum Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler? Yes. Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance has been introduced. Public hearing will be May 22nd, 2017. Next is 2017-22, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating speed limits on Hutchinson Drive and amending the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Is there a motion to introduce?
Second?
It's moved by Mr. Miller, seconded by Ms. Crumiller. Any questions or comments?
Let's just vote.
Okay.
Ms.
Keith-
Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crum Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler? Yes. Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ordinance has been introduced and the public hearing will be on May 22nd, 2017. Next is 2017-23, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton regulating speed limits on Great Road and amending the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. Is there a motion to introduce?
Yeah, and so move, second?
It's moved by Ms. Kremler, seconded by Mr. Miller. Any discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crum Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
You know,
And the
I
public-
just want to say, like, I've heard explanations about these last two ordinances because I attended the agenda meeting. Do we not feel we owe the, I mean, I know
I just
no
want to
one's-
say,
We can have them for the hearing.
For the record, I just want to say that the public hearing for the
All right.
Great Road ordinance will be on May 22nd, 2017. Did you want to wait for these? Is that what you were saying?
I was just thinking we might have a sentence of explanation. I didn't know whether everybody
For the
is
Great
fully
Road
worded.
or for the ones coming out?
Either one, it doesn't matter. Let's
not.
You know, there might be people watching or.
Well, true, yeah. It's for a small section of Great Road that precedes the light, that's coming from Elm Road out to Great Road. It's right before the new light on the Great Road. It lowers the speed limit to 25, which it seems like it's 25 already, so it's really not going to change much, and it will allow us to change the light so that it's not right turn, so that we can allow right turn on red at the red light there.
Thank you, Jenny. That was excellent. All right, the next ordinance is 2017-24, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton establishing a 3-hour metered parking zone on the east side of University Place between College Road and the Berlin Crosswalk and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974. Is there a motion to introduce?
Can I ask
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Howard. Did you move it?
No, I was going to ask a question.
Oh, so
but I
moved
should
by
allow it to
Mr.
be-
Quinn. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Butler. And Ms. Howard, do you have a question?
No, I'm just feeling guilty after that meeting with the parking consultants that we created another zone with a different time, that we sort of further balkanized, but.
I feel the same way. I
maybe
kind
the
of
only
feel
one
like
feels
it
that way. I'd rather go back to 2 hours, but.
I would too.
And that's, but, I mean, but I defer to the judgment of the majority, but it just, it brought home to me that we had created yet another layer that was, that was different.
It seems like a weird time to me, so I would.
Can I speak in defense of it? And it is on the agenda at 3 hours.
Yeah.
I think that's probably a parking consultant joke or something. They probably go into every town and everybody's parking ordinances have grown organically to meet the demands, and we saw tonight that every little street thinks that they're unique and need their own parking zone. In this particular case, it is sort of a special situation in that once the Arts Center opens, if people are going to an event there, if they're also having a meal, it could easily be 3 hours, or it could be that people are parking there and walking into town to do a little something and then coming back. It is slightly, I think that there's a reason that we might want to go to 3 hours. I also think that there's a chance that the parking study will come back and increase the 2 hour to either some greater number or even unlimited with a change in price at a certain point. So
I think that's fair.
this may be the wave of the future.
Yes, maybe the way of the future, but I think we've also learned once you put something in, you can never change it. So, anyway, no, I mean, I don't want to hold us up. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or ideas? All right. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
All right, the ordinance is introduced and the public hearing will be on May 22nd, 2017. Next is 2017-25, an ordinance by the municipality of Princeton extending the no parking zone on the east side of Alexander Street, north of Faculty Road, and amending the code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And this ordinance was to correct some sightline issues outside of the restaurant there.
Moved.
It's moved by Ms. Howard. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Miller. Any other discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Miller? Yes. Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
And the ordinance is introduced. The public hearing will be May 22nd, 2017. Next, we come to our resolutions. The first resolution.
Oh, I'd like to introduce those in block. We used to do that in the borough.
Can't.
Really? Even the contract? All right. All right, all the resolutions have been moved in block from 17-128 to 17-136 by Ms. Crummiller and seconded by Ms. Howard. Are there any comments on any of the items or questions?
I'm sorry. Could we just pull the purchase of the Lee Avenue? Would you reframe that?
The $75,000?
Number 4, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was that all right, Jenny?
Okay, do you want to remove it? Move it, all the resolutions minus number 4? Yeah. Okay, moved by Ms. Crummiller and seconded by Ms. Howard. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, those all pass, and then we'll come back to 17-131. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Butler. And
I just want a little bit of an
Seconded by Mr.
explanation on
Quinn.
this.
Who's second?
Mr. Quinn. Did you have a question, Joe?
Well, no, I not a question per se. I just wanted to hear a little bit about why we're purchasing this house.
And why it's such
does
a
it
good
have
price?
a park? And does it have come with a parking spot?
Saw that one coming.
This program,
52A.
52A Lee Avenue is being purchased. It was foreclosed upon by the property owners on the property. The property is up for sheriff's sale. It's part of our affordable housing inventory. We are taking the opportunity at sheriff's sale to purchase that property back, to put it back into our affordable housing inventory. We'll purchase it and then resell the property and recoup the funds from the purchase here.
Does that count as credit then or not, because it was already in the system?
No credit. Because it was already.
Okay.
You're doing it so you don't lose a unit
I see.
that
Okay.
you would then have to make up for somewhere else.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. Next, we come to the consent agenda. I did have one correction on the second item, 17-137, just in the title of the resolution, the amount is incorrect. It should be resolution authorizing an agreement with Princeton Community Housing in an amount not to exceed $3,125 for project management services for the Griggs Farm Balcony Project. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda with that change?
Yes, move as corrected.
Moved by Ms. Butler, seconded by Ms. Howard. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda passes, and there's not a desire to go back into closed session.
Could I just have 5 minutes on that COA issue?
For closed session, we don't have the COA folks here.
I
Does
know.
that matter?
Doesn't matter. Mark's here, right, Trishka?
Yep, okay.
Motion
There's a
to move
motion
into
to
closed
move
session.
into closed session.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
I would vote against it if I could.
That's a